Hello, everyone. I am Storyteller. Thank you for visiting this peaceful place. I know you are looking for something soothing to help you fall asleep, and I am here to accompany you. If you enjoy, please give me a like and subscribe, and let me know where you are from. Thank you. The courthouse. Almost 8:30 a.m. It was just before court would begin when his dead client, Mr. Black, showed up to talk. Benny knew the consequences for being late, so was short with him. "Why are you here now?" He spoke in a hushed tone to the apparition in front of him, glancing around as the Alameda County courtroom began to fill up. It would ruin his reputation as the best public defender in the county if people thought he spoke to ghosts. Mr. Black's gray suit, the one he used to always wear, appeared now to fit him well. His cuffs were no longer frayed, the holes gone. Benny tasted the bitter shame of his failure with Mr. Black's case as his stomach knotted. "You owe me more." Mr. Black's voice was flat and emotionless, so different from his last day in this courtroom, when the coughs racked his body, his handkerchief filled with blood. Benny's elbows pressed into the table. The air in the courtroom hung thick and stale. His thin fingers nudged the yellow pad, straightening it imperceptibly. He moved his two pens, one black and one red, so that they were even to the pad. "I paid my debt," Benny whispered. "With the last one." Mr. Black's anger roared like a fire, heating up the air around Benny like a blast furnace. The other, past inhabitants of this room, raged, their hate overwhelming him, even with so many clients. Benny prided himself that he cared about everyone, those he had saved from jail time, and those who were put away. Mr. Black was the first one to come back and visit him, though, after dying in prison, professing his innocence with his last breath. For the accused, Benny, king of the pleas, was the PD to get in, Alameda County. Most of his clients walked, or at least avoided jail time. Benny averaged 600 cases each year, however, so had some losses, and Benny felt the pain of everyone. But innocence and guilt have no place in the criminal justice system. And Benny had begun to wonder if his work meant anything. Some of his clients were monsters, and better off behind bars. Benny worked for his clients, but he lived in this city, had to deal with the crime and violence. Should he put his thumb on the scales of justice? Today, his past clients were weighing in, screaming in thunderous rage, frustration, and anger at what happened to them in this cursed room. "I shouldn't be here. It's not my fault," one voice called out. "I'm innocent," shouted another, then echoed over and over again into a cacophony, overwhelming Benny. Mr. Black's face leaned in to Benny, his voice roaring. "Pay up, or else." Bang, bang, bang. A gavel thundered, echoing off the wood walls around him. Mr. Black left, fading into the crowd and taking the voices with him. Benny released his breath, trying to focus on where he was and why. "The court is called to order," the judge called out. A pale, gray man with red and piercing eyes. His head floated above his black cloak. Benny blinked, looking around as the colors of the room came into focus. A man in an ill-fitting suit slumped next to him, eyes downcast. Fear vibrated in waves off the man. The fingers of his left hand pick at the nails of his right, over and over. The scraping sound like claws on steel bars. He leaned over to Benny. "Mr. Benny, we're going to be okay, right? You're going to save me. I mean, we have the receipt. It proves I wasn't there for the rape. They can't put this one on me." Benny nodded, but didn't turn. The man's high-pitched voice whined like a broken motor, his breath hot. Benny suddenly hated him, loathed him for being here and needing Benny's help. His life depended on Benny doing his job correctly. Did this man even deserve it? Benny peered toward him, just a glance out of the corner of his eye. Lean as a mop handle, he could not keep still, shoulders moving, fingers picking at imaginary flecks on his borrowed suit and the skin of his hands. Benny's lip curled in disgust. He opened the file, the case notes in perfect order, the receipt on top, stamped with proof of this man's location across town at the time of the sexual assault. The man's arm crossed in front of Benny, his skin red and mottled with sores. He pushed the receipt with a scarred finger. "My Monopoly card, get out of jail free." He laughed. "I need to keep that. There are a few other girls they don't know about yet." The man winked. Benny brushed his fingers on the receipt. Manicured fingernails pale over his dark skin, smoothing the wrinkled paper. A loud rushing sound filled Benny's head. They called to him, his clients who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, whose lives he could not save due to a lack of this kind of solid alibi. He heard them screaming, shouting at the unfairness, the inhumanity. At the district attorney's table across from him, a tall, thin woman stared with shrewd, cold eyes. She turned away to put her head down into a stack of files. Voices cried out from her table too. People wronged and insulted in the worst way. Losing property, their self-respect, or their family, and then forced to sit in this horrible room and go home with nothing but tears and anger. Their voices were loud. "Punish! Vengeance! An eye for an eye!" The screams racked Benny's brain, and he shut his eyes. His hands flew to his temple, pressing in to quiet their cries. Bang, bang, bang. The gavel thundered again. Benny stood, motioning to his client to stand as well. Benny clenched his jaw and knew knew the answer to his dilemma. Forget what was best for the client or society. Benny needed to look out for himself. This man will be sacrificed to Mr. Black to appease him and the demons chasing Benny. This man was guilty, of course. Maybe not for this crime, but for another, Benny was certain. Benny will change places, go from the defender to the accuser, from the protector to the judge. His fingers moved, just a brief sweep, and the paper receipt floated unseen, down out of the file, into the trash can. Gone. The trial moved fast. A police officer, serious and trustworthy in his pressed blue uniform, pointed at the man next to Benny. "That's the guy." Whispers erupted from the courtroom. Bodies shifted on the wooded seats, squeaking with their movements. "That man is just evil. I could tell right off," someone said. "The monster should hang for what he did to that girl." Another voice added. Bang, bang, bang. Justice thundered down from on high. "The verdict is guilty," the judge shouted, a sneer on his face. "Next." Benny squeezed his eyes shut as the voices in his head roared out, echoing, "Guilty! Guilty!" The bailiff pulled on the man next to him. "No, I'm innocent," he screamed. "Mr. Benny, what happened?" Mr. Black appeared in front of Benny, nodding before he left, with the man to his future hell. Then the voices were gone, the sudden silence deafening. Benny picked up his red hen to carefully put a small X to the end of the line of thousands of black and red marks, then lifted the next file off the foot-high stack next to him. "Justice will be done," returning Marie. "Now, before I say anything else, I just need to establish that I am not mad. I have every reason to be mad, but I'm not. I'm not mad. I've never been less mad than I am right now, even though I have every reason to be madder than I've ever been in my life. To the best of my recollection, you were not working here when I came in on Sunday. I'm sure I would remember somebody with as many piercings as you, especially with you being such a young lady and all. I'm sure I would have made some sort of comment about how you don't have a wedding ring on your finger. And that's probably due to all those cartoons you've chosen to imprint upon yourself. No. When I came in here on Sunday, there was a rather old man working behind the counter. I told him I was looking for a rug because my mother-in-law is coming to town, and whenever she comes over, she expects me to put out all the gifts she's gotten me over the years. 18 years of marriage, and she expects to see everything she's ever bought as though my home is some sort of Daphne Rubite museum. That's her name. Daphne Rubite. She tells me it's Latin, but who knows? The woman lies about everything. Why should her name be any different? Anyway, she got me a rug for Christmas last year, and it was so hideous that I kept it outside in the shed. But when I sent my husband, Griff, to go fetch it so we could display the awful thing, he said. It appeared somebody had broken into the shed and stolen it. Do you believe that? Somebody actually wanted that disgusting rug so much they committed a crime in order to have it. Not that there's much in that shed worth anything, but even the bags of dirt would have been a better choice. My word, I came in here on Sunday because I was looking for a rug that appeared similar to the ugly rug that was stolen. But despite this, allegedly, being an antique store, you do not sell rugs here. I believe I filed a formal complaint in that little suggestion box you have at the front, but I haven't heard any response yet. We can circle back to that later. When I expressed my disappointment to the old man working here at the counter, he offered to give me a discount on what he described as a rather interesting mirror. He went into the back of the store and came back with the item. I found it to be a bit too ornate for my taste. It was imitation gold, and the glass had several scratches on it. I told the old man that a discount would not suffice for a damaged object, but that I would accept it as a gift from the store, since I found it so unprofessional of him not to offer unattractive rugs. He took a moment, looked at the mirror, and then agreed to give it to me, gratis. The old man did not put up much of a fight, and I suppose I should have taken that as a sign that something was amiss. When I got the mirror home, I had absolutely no desire to ever look at it again. The only reason I took it was because I never turned down a deal, and there is no better deal than free. I decided to deposit it in my daughter's room. Riva is 15, and as such, she believes she has impeccable taste, when in fact, she has no taste whatsoever. She was quite stunned when I showed her the mirror. It's unusual for me to give her gifts, even on her birthday, when I usually donate money to a charity in her name. She took to the mirror immediately, and Griff did his best to hang it in her room, without putting holes in every wall. Finally, he managed to erect it by her closet, and then we all went about our day in preparation for the arrival of Queen Daphne. Almost immediately, things began to go wrong. I noticed that suddenly all the photographs around the house had been altered. I had no idea how it was happening, but the heads of everyone in the photos were gone. Simply gone. I thought it might be some sort of prank, but neither my husband nor my daughter are all that funny. When I mentioned the occurrence at dinner that night, Riva confessed to me that she believed her mirror was haunted. Not just haunted, mind you, but haunted by the ghost of Marie Antoinette. I would have chalked the whole thing up to a teenager's imagination. But my daughter is the least imaginative person you've ever met in your life. Deciding to investigate myself, I marched straight up to her room and planted myself in front of that mirror. Sure enough, after only a moment or two, there she was, Reina de France herself. She had her head but there was a minor scar around her neck, and she was holding the most adorable little dog. My French is spotty, since I haven't spoken it since college, when I spent a semester abroad in Paris, smoking cigarettes and ordering hamburgers at French cafes. I managed to work out that the mirror given to me was once owned by Marie's great-great-granddaughter, and she had taken up residence in it since she found heaven to be rather dull. She was the one who changed all the photos, and she said she planned on committing even more mischief for as long as she was in my house, unless I donated her to a museum where she belonged. Well, if that stuck-up monarch thought I was going to relinquish my own property simply to avoid a little poltergeisting, she was sadly mistaken. I told Marie that she was now a guest in my home and would act accordingly, or I would see to it that her mirror was placed in the shed where some petty thieves might abscond with it, the same way they had with the revolting rug my mother-in-law had purchased for me. I was so invested in intimidating a dead Frenchwoman that I didn't even hear the front door open. Daphne had entered our house without knocking, shocker, and came right upstairs to greet Riva, because her granddaughter is the only person she actually cares to see. She arrived just in time to hear me relay to Marie the story of the stolen rug, and she was none too pleased. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, holding the most vile candelabra I've ever laid my eyes on. "Well," she huffed, "would you care to throw this in the shed as well?" Truth be told, that's exactly what I wanted to do with it. Over the next few days, I couldn't tell you who irritated me more, my mother-in-law or the ghost of Marie Antoinette. While Daphne did her standard passive-aggressive commentary on everything from my fashion choices. A woman your age wearing skirts? How brave. To how I raise my child. Would one birthday gift a year really be that bad? Marie preferred to be a bit more whimsical in her torment. The house was constantly filled with smoke, for no reason at all. It wasn't until I located the source of the smoke that I realized our oven was on high, and there was a cake burning inside of it. It might be true that she never actually uttered the phrase about letting servants have their pastry, but that's no reason to waste perfectly good food. I have no idea how she even put the cakes together in the first place, since we normally order takeout and keep absolutely nothing in our pantries. Another tidbit Daphne likes to use against me when she visits. "No sugar," she'll squawk. What kind of a household has no sugar? A skinny household. That's what I feel like saying, but I never do. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought the two of them were conspiring against me in my own home. Daphne blamed Marie when all my skincare products were suddenly smeared all over the bathroom walls. But I can't believe anyone that rich would willfully waste La Mer. Marie was definitely responsible for what was going on with Riva. however, my daughter suddenly began acting out. She was shouting about bourgeoisie and escargot and something about a pot de chambre. It took me a day or so, but then I understood that Marie was trying to possess the girl in order to have an even more effective way of terrorizing everyone in the household. Griff was no help at all during all of this. By the way, he loves the History Channel, so for him, this was all wildly entertaining. It wasn't until Riva began taking 5 baths a day and demanding that I feed her bonbons that I decided enough was enough. My plan was to take the mirror out to the shed and smash it into 1,000 pieces. But I remember seeing an old horror film where destroying the haunted item caused the specter to permanently embed itself in the home. The last thing I needed was my daughter walking around like royalty until leaving for whatever community college we'd be sending her off to. I waited until earlier today, when Daphne and Riva were sitting on the couch with a cheese plate watching Les Miserables. And then I tore up to Riva's room and grabbed the mirror. I had to be careful coming down the stairs with it. But luckily for me, they were engrossed in the scene where the revolutionaries were being slaughtered. "Brilliant," I heard Marie exclaim in French. "I just love a good comedy." Somehow, all by myself, I managed to get this ghastly mirror into my car and drive it all the way back here. Now, I would like to return it. I would like an apology. I would like 3 free items from this store, all of which I will be choosing. I would also like an assurance that the old man who gave me the mirror is fired. What do you mean you don't have any old man working here? He was very distinct looking. He had bifocals, salt and pepper hair, and his left ear was a bit lower than his right. Surely you must know him, the owner, all right? Fine. So he's the owner. I still want him fired. What's that? When? 10 years ago. And how? A car accident? My. Well, that's what I get for not asking for a receipt. Feast. It's 2 a.m. Cassie's mournful dirge drifts up from the pantry. I lie in bed, staring at the moonlight through the open window, exhausted from the absence of sleep, pondering whether tonight is the night I start to set boundaries, feign ignorance to my daughter's call for attention, or go downstairs to take care of her needs, as I have done every night since she died. The illuminated hands of the clock read 2:30 a.m. by the time she falls silent. For a moment, hope offers me its hand. Has the torment finally ended? Is peace now mine? A drumbeat pounds in my ears. Nerves fire off insurgent tension. And 2:45 a.m. is the time I begin to believe she has quietened for the night. I close my eyes, breathe in, breathe out. Unfamiliar calm trickles in. At the point sleep beckons, a sudden thunder crash of rage shakes my bed, and I hear Cassie howl like a banshee. Hope withdrawn, I throw off the duvet, slide my feet into cold slippers, and head downstairs on a silent prayer for Cassie to be gone by the time I open the pantry door. But she's there, on top of the refrigerator, like a mound of meringue, all folds and as white as freshly fallen snow. The silver heart charm that dangled from her wrist in life still in place. Her shadowy eyes are red and swollen. Her pudgy hands reach out to grasp the air. "About time," she wails, a repeat of what she says to me every night. I sigh, rub my sore eyes. "Sorry, sweetie. I was trying to sleep. It's almost 3 a.m. You do realize that?" A flash of times past when Cassie, a toddler, would creep into my room in the early hours to tell me she had been calling out for help in the bathroom, and would I come with her right now, because she really needed to go. Me chastising her as I chastise her now. I shrug. Then again, you're a spirit, so maybe you don't. A moan bubbles, bursts up from her insides. The pitch is ear-splitting. I am forced to cover my ears. "Do you realize how long I've been waiting?" she says. "Are you trying to starve me all over again?" She drags out the word starve. It stokes my guilt, and in my exhaustion, I want to laugh hysterically. I open the fridge door, bury the sarcastic smile playing on my lips amidst the piles of food on the shelves. Cream-filled pastries, trifles, cooked sausages, and bacon. Chocolate muffins topped with swirly icing domes. A foodie's paradise. But the sight makes me balk. Food dominated Cassie's 19-year lifespan. Mine, too. I cannot believe it dominates her in death. What would you like, Cassie? There's lots to choose from. How about, before I can finish, her yelling bounces off the pantry walls. Anything. Just give me anything. I need to feed, and you're frittering away precious time asking me what I'd like. I take out the plate of sausages. In those first few weeks, she showed up. I took the time to place them in a bread roll, slather on ketchup and mustard to make it look appealing. I don't bother with the presentation now. Instead, I throw them into her open mouth as if I'm feeding a ravenous, feral dog. She doesn't chew. I'm not sure ghosts have the ability, but gulps them down in an instant. I see them slip through her transparent, organ-free form. It's like watching a medical scan in real time. They leave her as they went in, whole, unchewed, undigested, splatting to the floor. I follow with the cakes and trifles. Watch my spirit daughter gorge only to cry for more. I take the dustpan and brush, sweep up the mess, pour it back into her, and this is the cycle, pending her being satiated enough to cease her demands. Once the cycle stops, and Cassie is soothed, I'll clean up, throw it all in the bin. It'll be far too mushy by then to save. Besides, it soon stinks the place out. Then I'll sit a while, talk to her about anything and nothing, until those shadowy eyes of hers close and she falls silent for the rest of the night. I share some blame for Cassie's current state and for how her life turned out. Weighing in at a hefty 13 pounds after a pregnancy sustained purely by chocolate bars, the only food my constantly nauseous stomach wouldn't eject. Cassie suckled the entire first night. Such was her voracious demands, until I was too sore for her to touch me. A bout of mastitis sealed the deal to move her onto bottle feeds. We'll see if she's meant to be this big, the health visitor said. You're only a small build, so maybe she'll slow down. Cassie did slow down, but I wasn't worried. Children grow at different paces. She possessed a healthy appetite, cleaning every morsel from her plate, and more. An active child, she remained slim, but followed her centiles, a term used by health professionals. Listening to the mothers at the school gates, fraught with their fussy eaters, I admit to feeling smug. Then, one day, karma bit me for my arrogance. Cassie stopped eating. Her personality changed. She was having trouble with her friends, bullying, her teachers said. A phase, I thought. But after 6 months, it dawned that this was no phase. Something far more serious was at play. Cassie is 10 years old and weighs what a child half her age should weigh. How long has she been experiencing problems with food? The doctor gazed at me with sympathetic eyes as he spoke. I was grateful for it. It made a change from the critical glances I had become used to. I took Cassie's hand, gave it a reassuring squeeze. She pulled away, a fierce scowl that said, "You are a lying bitch," came my way. She had gone through the surgery door under false pretense, that of holiday vaccines, to go somewhere exotic. I had said it with my face set in stone, so she didn't suspect. I risked paying a heavy price for inventing such a whopper. But by then, I'd have done and said anything if it meant getting Cassie help. Since summer, so 6 or 7 months maybe, I replied. She didn't like the way she looked in her swimsuit, said her thighs were too wobbly to be on show. I thought it would pass, only it hasn't. It's getting worse. I've been called to collect her from school several times because she's fainted. She gets breathless at the slightest exertion. Her bones jut out. She's pale and sleeps a lot. I'm really worried about her. I wanted to say I feared she'd die, but to say it could make it happen. So I kept it to myself. There's a risk of lifelong health problems if she doesn't start gaining weight. The doctor looked to Cassie. Do you understand what is happening here, Cassie? You are very thin. and it's not good for you." Cassie stared at the floor, her arms crossed over her chest. The doctor sighed. "Let's see what help we can get for you, shall we?" We left the surgery. A prescription for supplementary feeds, iron pills, and vitamins stuffed in my pocket. A referral to child psychiatry on its way. Cassie sulked all the way home, shut herself away for several days without uttering a word to me. When she did finally show, her rage had stepped up a notch. "How dare you tell the doctor that I don't eat, Mum?" she yelled. "It is my business, not yours and not his." She stood in the middle of the kitchen, arms flailing, her tinny ribs visible beneath one of the close-fitting tops she insisted on wearing to display what she saw as a model figure. Cassie's glare cut me. I felt like the devil reincarnated. "You need help, sweetie. I've tried to do this on my own, but I'm lost now. I don't know what to do anymore. You're wasting away. I can't stand to see you like this." "Then don't look at me." Hands on hips, head thrust forward, a wild glint in her eyes. "Cassie, please don't. I only want to help, so shut up and leave me alone." She stomped off to her room. At the top of the stairs, she called out, "And just so you know, I will not see a doctor ever again." The door at the bottom of the stairs opened. As Cassie paced towards the kitchen, I was quick to hide the bottle labeled sugar-free lemonade I had refilled with a sugar-loaded version inside the refrigerator. Cassie was 15 at the time, skeletal, walking miles every day and night. She appeared in the kitchen door, layered up in clothing, a scarf and woolly hat. Despite the heating being cranked so high, I could barely breathe. "It's cold outside. They've forecast rain, too," I said. "Why don't we watch a film? I've bought some of that toffee popcorn and hazelnut chocolate you've always liked." Gray rings circled her eyes. Angry red spots shone from her cheeks. "Maybe later," she said, and turned to leave. "Be back by 1. It's clinic today. Don't forget." The front door slammed behind her. Despite her lack of response, I knew Cassie would return home in time for her weekly appointment. She had signed an agreement with the medics, one I knew she would not default on. In exchange for doctors pausing her forced admission to hospital, she would eat a little more, show up at the clinic every Friday to be weighed, have her bloods checked. We drove to the clinic that afternoon, Cassie staring out of her side window, me humming along to the radio. The sun had broken through the clouds, turning a gray day beautiful. Inside the clinic, Cassie disappeared with the nurse, only to return several moments later, an ecstatic grin on the nurse's face. "She's put on a whole kilogram since last week," the nurse announced. A glimmer of light shone. I began to see faith in that pivotal moment. Yet my faith would soon be shattered. The next morning, as laundry tossed in the washing machine, I heard a knock-knock coming from inside. I found nothing obvious when I emptied the machine, but when checking through the clothing, I felt small, hard lumps in the hems of Cassie's trousers, in the lining of the jacket she had worn the day previous, childlike stitching on the inner side. I picked it open. Pebbles fell on the floor. You should have put her in the psychiatric hospital when you had the chance. They'd have sorted her out. They're the professionals, not you. Having chided me throughout this challenging time, my mother's unwanted advice didn't come as a surprise. Cassie doesn't want to be in hospital, Mum. And I couldn't bear to think of her being force-fed, and that's what would happen. It would be purgatory for her. I'm sure she'd do something drastic, so she dies either way. Choking back tears, my feet barely touched the floor as I left the house, car keys in hand. I sped off down the road, not knowing where I was headed. I didn't return home for another 3 months. I woke from the induced coma 3 weeks after the car accident. Extensive surgical repairs to my left leg, from thigh to ankle, meant weeks of rehab and learning to walk again. By the time I returned home, Cassie had a slight prominence to her tummy, a rounder face, but she seemed downbeat, soulless. There, you see? My mother proudly paraded a plumper Cassie before me. This is what happens when you set boundaries for your children and don't allow them to control you. I took Cassie's hands. You look amazing, sweetie. So pretty. We hugged. I felt the meat on her bones, the warmth of her. She forced a smile, although darkness sat in her eyes. For the remainder of my mother's stay, I watched Cassie shovel her grandmother's meals into her mouth, mindless, not seeming to taste or enjoy what was going in. She tried to throw it all back up again when I first arrived, didn't you, dear? But I put a stop to that too, my mother announced. Cassie nodded. She didn't look up, said nothing, kept on like a robot, loading her fork, filling her mouth, swallowing. I should have been happy she was eating. I wasn't. When I asked, neither Cassie nor my mother would elaborate on what went on between them during my absence. Cassie would shrug, remain tight-lipped. My mother would smile and say, "Proper parenting, dear." Only at Cassie's wake, 4 years later, did my mother offer her pious explanation. I broke her. That's what happened. I removed everything she liked. Her music, the TV, those awful childish coloring books you insisted on buying for her. I locked her inside the house so she couldn't exercise. I put a spoon to her mouth every damn meal until she caved and started to eat. No food, no reward. When she fought against me, I slapped her every minute of every day for the entire 3 months, never out of my sight. That's all it took to get Cassie back again. It's what you should have done, but no, you had to give in to her again. Now look where she is. She turned to look at Cassie's photograph on the mantel. Then she was gone. You didn't like me when I was thin. You don't like me now I'm fat, do you? Cassie asks. I sit opposite Cassie's ghost on a chair I've dragged from the dining room. I haven't yet cleaned up the food mess from the floor. I stare into the myriad colors and textures. I've always loved you, Cassie. I worried about you when you were too thin. It didn't mean I disliked you. The saucepan flying through the air, the bolognese within it spraying across the kitchen cabinets, plates smashed against the floor tiles in my desperation to see her eat. Never have I revealed this to Cassie, but these were the times I disliked her the most. I used to think you were a useless mother. Misery and wrath cross Cassie's face like a hologram changes when it is turned. Do you still think that? I ask. You didn't understand me. You were afraid to. Cassie's eyes meet mine. I see the depth of her melancholy. An infinite, darkened pool. She is distant, forever out of reach, as she always was. Yet I failed to see it, failed to see why. A lump comes to my throat. I cannot swallow it down. I grab the dustpan and brush to clear away the debris from the floor. Next comes the mop, swishing back and forth until the dirty patch shines. Throughout, Cassie is silent, watching me work. Eventually, she breaks the peace. Do you miss me? I lean on the mop handle. I miss you dreadfully, Cassie. I just wish our time together had been different, happier, less of a fight, squeezing out the water from the mop. I wonder why Cassie's ghost did not return with the appearance she bore when she died. Emaciated, barely there. Was her ghostly bulk meant to taunt me? As if she reads my mind, she says, "You were only happy when I ate, when I was bigger." So she comes here looking like this because she thinks it's how I prefer to see her. I drop my head to hide the brimming tears. It doesn't make me happy to see you like this, to see you so sad. Not back then, and certainly not now. The tremble in my bones reverberates in my voice. Cassie judders. Her mountainous bulk ripples. Her face crumples as the wailing kicks in. The mop drops from my hand, and I move to take her in my arms, stopping in my tracks when I realize I cannot touch her, cannot feel her. It's okay, sweetie. You don't have to do this. Believe me, I'd rather you rest. Her crying fades out like the end of a song. She becomes still. You don't wish to see me again? Her question is but a whisper. I would give anything to see you again, but not like this, and not if it causes you pain. For the first time since she started showing up here, I see her spirit smile. 5 a.m. The night after, and the dusky sky is littered with glistening dots. A chill seeps in through the open window. I shudder, get up to close the window, and with the click of its handle, my sleepy brain registers that I have not been stirred to the sound of Cassie's dirge. I listen for her cries. Nothing except silence fills the house. I should climb into bed, thankful for the peace. Instead, I creep downstairs, each step tentative, not wanting to rouse her or set off her wailing. The pantry door opens with a creak. I step inside. Cassie is gone, but for her heart charm bracelet lying on the top of the refrigerator. I pick up the bracelet, place it around my wrist, feel her presence against my skin. It tells me she will not return here, that her haunting is done. I take the stairs, crawl into my bed. Instantly, I fall asleep. Cassie's heart charm gripped between my fingertips. The spooky boogie. Halloween is a holiday that everyone knows well because it's the only time humans and spirits can coexist. Every year on October 31st, the dead rise from their graves and walk among us. The demons crawl out from the shadows because the holy light holds no sway, and even the monsters come out to play. At first, there was bloodshed on both sides, but it didn't take long for humans to adapt to the annual phenomenon by dressing up in silly costumes to blend in with the evil entities. And oddly enough, it worked. When bloodlust is in a demon's eyes, they fail to see the obvious. Over the years, the tradition morphed into a children's fairy tale. And these days, no one bats an eye if a spectral spook passes by. Adults took on a responsible attitude and allowed their little ones to go out and enjoy the night. Soon after, a festive event called trick-or-treating came roaring into every neighborhood around the world. Every girl and boy would get candy if they simply knocked on someone's door and said, "Trick or treat." The evil creatures paid no attention to the humans and their silly ways. They couldn't tell friend from foe when they wore the costumes, or why one of their own would knock on a stranger's door and not tear them apart. It was a farce that became institutionalized in its absurdity. To each their own. As the world grew older, so did the Halloween fairy tale. The traditional holiday of trick-or-treating morphed into a health-conscious day when adults decided that too much sugar was bad for their kids. It became a hot topic for years, but the day of righteousness came when many children became obese. In the end, the simple solution was fair and just. The little ones could still go out on Halloween night, but instead of getting candy, they would get vegetables instead. It wasn't a popular decision, but it became law and was written in stone. The evil spirits didn't care one way or the other because they floated on with their once-a-year Halloween romp, stomp, and boogie. They still couldn't tell humans from demons, but occasionally a slip-up would occur. If someone removed their costume or mask in a spirit's presence, they were torn limb from limb without a second thought. This was a rare occurrence, but an important reminder to parents and children everywhere to always wear their outfits, no matter what. In the wee hours on Lame Street, Timmy Lawson sat before his parents while his mom Amanda adjusted his vampire cape. She saw his legs thumping and asked, "Are you nervous about tonight?" Timmy widened his and replied, "No, Mom. My Dracula costume is the best on the block, and I'm ready to go." He parted his mouth slightly to show his fake vampire teeth and snarled, "Arr!" Amanda looked at her watch and bit her bottom lip. Her blonde hair hid her face, but Timmy could sense her apprehension. "I'll be fine, Mom. I know you will," Amanda said. "I'm your mother, and I'm allowed to worry." Timmy folded his arms and frowned. "Mom!" "Fine," Amanda blurted. "You better get going before it gets too late." Doves exploded in Timmy's heart, and he jumped out of his chair. "Yay!" His father, John, who was always overprotective, lowered his evening paper and warned, "Before you go, I want you to be on your best behavior. And remember, no candy or sweets." Amanda parted her golden locks and echoed, "That's right, Timmy. Only vegetables." Timmy lowered his head and slouched. "No one gives out candy anymore. It's against the law." John reached up to his clean-shaven face and removed his black glasses. "That's true, son. But in this world, there are still a lot of people out there who don't follow that law. Just remember, humans are just as bad as those monsters, and perhaps a bit worse." "Okay, Dad." Timmy didn't fully understand, but his dad was a wise man, and he'd be a fool not to listen. "Your father's right," Amanda said. "We just want you to be safe." She knelt and placed a gentle kiss on Timmy's forehead. "Now go have some fun." A bright sparkle filled Timmy's eyes, and an eruption of freedom sprang from his lungs. He grabbed his empty pumpkin bucket and raced through the front door without saying goodbye. The cool night air brushed over his skin like a masterful painter, lightly kissing the canvas with a boisterous color. Lame Street was bustling with children dressed in their favorite costumes: clowns, unicorns, beasts, and all. What an awesome night. Lame Street was a small suburban community where every house looked the same, with trimmed bushes, mowed lawns, and perfectly placed trash cans that stood next to the residential mailboxes by the sidewalk. A place where everyone drove a Prius and worked 9-to-5 jobs. Everything was routine, and that's the way they liked it. As Timmy took in the scene, he noticed that his friends were waiting for him at the end of the driveway. Alice was dressed as a ghost. Her white bed sheet, with the eyes cut out, showed a sliver of red hair, which was a dead giveaway. The werewolf was Fred. There was no mistaking that, because he had an uneven stride and often lingered behind the others to hide his anxiety. Then there was Carrie, dressed in a silky black dress with a matching pointy hat, long fake nose, and a huge brown wart stuck to her right cheek. She was a witch. "What took you so long?" Carrie asked. We've been waiting here forever." "Sorry," Timmy said, walking towards them. "My parents, I'm gonna stop you right there, pal," Alice fired. "We all know your parents are a bag of dicks, so let's go before the night ends. The other kids are already going home." Carrie gave Timmy a wry smile as their eyes met, and he took the lead down the sidewalk. "Okay then," Timmy said, with rosy cheeks. "Let's have some fun and get as many vegetables as we can." I don't like vegetables," Fred stuttered, bringing up the rear. The first house they visited was Mr. Sullivan's, their 4th grade math teacher. Timmy knocked 3 times on his oak door, and Mr. Sullivan laughed when it swung open. "Ah, what do we have here? A witch, vampire, ghost, and a werewolf. Trick or treat, Mr. Sullivan," Carrie yelled, holding out her black plastic cauldron. Sullivan smiled and said, "Well, don't you all look so cute?" He reached around the corner and revealed a huge basket of apples. "Here you go, children. I'm afraid I'm out of veggies this evening, so these juicy apples will have to do." Timmy extended a shaky hand and swallowed deep. "My parents said only vegetables. Fruits and veggies are a heaven's delight," Sullivan groaned. "I don't see the harm as long as it's not candy." He pushed the basket further toward the kids. Alice grabbed one and quickly took a bite. The sweet juices dripped down her chin, and she smiled. "See, they're not laced with poison, so grab one and let's go." Well, you wouldn't know right away, because the poison takes a few minutes to kill you anyway," Fred said, peering through his wolf mask. They all shared a laugh, grabbed an apple, and headed for the next house. "Thanks, Mr. Sullivan. See you back in school." "Okay, children," he said, watching them leave. "Be safe, and don't forget that quiz on Monday." The second house belonged to Jane Thatcher, leader of the neighborhood gossip group. When she answered the door, the kids saw a huge bucket filled with baby carrots. "Hello, kids. You all look nice." Alice held out her ghost bucket and watched Jane throw one baby carrot in. Plop. Alice narrowed her eyes and asked, "What happened to the big carrots we got last year?" Jane drew her lips in and took a deep breath. The kids leaned backward and flared their nostrils because her breath smelled like an ashtray. That's because she smoked a pack a day. Well, times are tough, and you can't blame an old lady for trying to save a little. "That's okay," Timmy said, holding out his pumpkin bucket. "It's better than nothing." Fred held out his wolf bucket and stepped back when he saw Jane place 3 baby carrots inside. He blinked rapidly behind his mask before noticing her ashen breath upon his brow. "There you go, sweetie. I think your costume looks the best. And everyone knows I like my men with a lot of hair." Ha, ha, ho. When he saw her yellow-stained teeth up close, Fred ran away. The others quickly followed. but they couldn't hide their laughter. "Don't forget to come back now, you hear?" Jane yelled. That was gross," Fred moaned. "Ha, ha, ha," laughed Alice. "I think she likes you." Timmy couldn't uncurl his smiling lips. "No, I think she loves you. She wants to pet your fur," Alice scoffed. "All right, guys," Carrie urged, taking off her hat. "That's enough. Fred didn't deserve that, and we have no right to make fun." Fred removed his fury gloves and shook the sweat out. He shuffled his feet, cleared his throat, and coughed. "You... I can still taste her rotten breath." Timmy removed his fake fangs and said, "Carrie's right. I'm sorry for laughing at you, but it was a little funny." "Yeah?" Alice said, lifting her bed sheet to suck in the night air. "We were just pulling your leg. We're sorry." Fred swayed from side to side and said, "It's fine. I guess it was a little funny." "You know what we need?" Alice muttered. "We need some candy. That would be awesome." "We can't have candy," Timmy said, looking at the pavement. "Besides, no one around here gives it out anyway." Carrie nodded and gave Alice a pat on the shoulder. "You're right. Getting vegetables every year sucks. And it would be nice to have some sweets." Yeah, Fred agreed. Suddenly, a deep, shallow whisper blew by the children, like a small flower floating in the air on a warm summer day. Did someone say candy? Stepping out from the nearby bushes was a small, slender man. His face was a carved pumpkin, and he wore a black top hat with a matching suit with gold trim, boots, and white pants. He held an antique lantern to light his way. The children were speechless. They had never seen a costume like his. "Who are you?" Timmy asked, breaking the silence. His eyes were fixated on the mysterious figure. "Me? I'm Mr. Spooky, silly," he said, bowing. He wobbled over and peered into their plastic buckets. "What's this? An apple? Carrots? Where are the sweet treats?" Alice placed her hands on her hips, and her sheet ruffled in the wind. "We're not allowed to have them. Where have you been hiding? Under a rock or something?" "No," Mr. Spooky said. He held up his lantern and uttered, "I've been locked away in darkness for the longest time, but I found this light, and it has guided me here." Are you a demon?" Fred asked, taking a step back. "I told you already. My name is Mr. Spooky, and there is no other." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of lollipops. "I have all the sweet treats you could ask for." Alice widened her eyes, and the sheet covering her face became moist at the mouth. "Wow!" Timmy shook his head when he heard his parents' words echo. "No candy, only vegetables." The thought sent a river of snakes sliding down his side. "We're not allowed to have any candy, Mr. Spooky." "What?" Mr. Spooky shrieked. "No candy? That's absurd. Don't you know what day this is?" Carrie stepped forward and brushed Mr. Spooky's hand away. She didn't want to hear any more of his nonsense. "Look, Timmy's right. We can't have candy, no matter how much we want it. It's the law. If we break it, we'll be grounded forever. How rude, Mr. Spooky said. No child should ever be grounded. My candy will free you and make you fly like the birds in the sky. Look, man, we appreciate your offer, but we need to go now, Fred said. The children turned their backs to Mr. Spooky and left him alone with an upside-down smile. They didn't mean to hurt his feelings, but in their defense, they were trying to do the right thing. Mr. Spooky thought and thought as the children walked away. No child should ever go without sweet treats. I must change their minds. Wait! He called out. The kids stopped and turned. I have a spooktacular idea. We should do the spooky boogie dance. It always cheers me up. And then maybe you will have some delicious treats. Before the children could say anything, Mr. Spooky stuck out his butt and twirled around like a dancing clown. Timmy, Alice, Fred, and Carrie had a strong urge to run away. But they stood firmly and watched Mr. Spooky because he was just too darn cute. Before they knew it, he broke out into a song. Everybody twirl your body. Do the spooky boogie. Clap, clap, clap. Throw your hands up now. And clap, clap, clap. Stick that booty out. And clap, clap, clap. Do the spooky boogie. Shuffle here and shuffle there. Do the spooky boogie. The spooky boogie. Mr. Spooky's song and dance intoxified the air like a poison mist, and the children soon found themselves twirling and singing along. Their minds were like a lost ship sailing into uncharted waters. The discovery of a newfound rebellion was at hand. Within minutes, candy rained down, much to Mr. Spooky's delight. Oh, how wonderful! Sweet treats from the heavens above. Dig in now and enjoy the splendor. Timmy clenched his stomach and stiffened his jaw. No? Our parents said no, but I say yes. What good is Halloween if we can't enjoy a sweet snack? Mr. Spooky spun around and threw more candy at the children. Alice was the first child to give in to the wicked bliss. She picked up a chocolate bar and took a big bite. Oh, this is wonderful! Fred grabbed a piece of Laffy Taffy and bit into the sticky goodness. As it stretched an arm's length, he smiled and said, This is good. Carrie and Timmy held out the longest, but after seeing their friends give in, they had to sample the goods. They grabbed a peanut butter bar and crunched down. No words came, but Mr. Spooky could tell they loved it by their upward smiles. That's it, my lovelies. Eat. Eat until you've had your fill of sugary sweets. Mr. Spooky twirled and swirled like a ballerina and watched the children devour the candy like a pack of wild dogs. They were in it deep now and munched away every ounce of the candy. They ate so much that they fell to the pavement. They were plump, juicy, and ripe. Now that you've all had your fill, I suppose I shall have mine, Mr. Spooky growled, walking around their fallen bodies. You all look so delicious. Timmy rolled over and mumbled, No, you can't do this. Mr. Spooky cackled at Timmy's protest. He raised his lantern and smashed it down on his head. The impact did nothing more than shut his mouth. With another twirl, a thick plume of purple smoke filled the air, and Mr. Spooky transformed into a hideous demon. His sweet pumpkin face gave birth to devious evil that was hidden all along. He ripped his suit off to reveal a pair of old brown overalls that covered a dusty white shirt. His voice had also changed. It was deeper and more demonic. Yummy, yummy. You children are now full of sugar, just the way I like my sweet treats. Mr. Spooky reached into his overalls and pulled out 2 sharp kitchen knives that twinkled in the moonlight. Now, stay still while I cut you up to pieces. I can't eat you whole after all, ha 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 ha. Alice still had a piece of chocolate in her mouth, and as Mr. Spooky walked towards her, knives dangling by his side, she spat out the sugary treat. He carelessly stepped into the sticky goo and fell with a thunderous thud. His blade slid in front of Timmy and Carrie, and they grabbed them with lightning speed. Fred exploded to his feet and tackled Mr. Spooky so he couldn't escape. You're not going anywhere. Even he was surprised at his newfound courage. That's right, Alice yelled, standing. The one thing about sugar is that it messes with your mind and makes you want more. Yeah, Timmy said, holding his head. And we are still hungry. What? Mr. Spooky shouted. You can't do this to me. Mr. Spooky writhed back and forth, trying to break free from Fred's grasp, but it was useless. Timmy and Carrie seized the moment, plunged their blades into Mr. Spooky's head, and cut away huge chunks of pumpkin slices. He screamed like a dying cat. Alice and Fred stuck their mouths inside his skull and drank deeply with their sticky lips. They spat out the seeds and laughed. Timmy and Carrie continued carving away until their sugar rush melted away and ate what was left. The last thing Mr. Spooky heard was someone chomping down on his skull. Later that night, the children agreed to return to Timmy's house to watch some scary movies. They promised each other that they would never talk about what had happened. When they walked through the door, Timmy's parents asked, "Did you all eat your vegetables?" In one collective voice, they said, "Yes, we did." The gates of hell. Jaxby staggered through the desert with 2 empty water jugs in his backpack, but the heat weighed him down. The protein bars were long gone, but that was just as well, because he couldn't have swallowed them anyway. He didn't have any saliva. Step by step, he began to accept that he was going to die. Buzzards circled the sky, watching their supper cook. All he had to do was lay down. His legs and feet wouldn't hold him up much longer. Soon, he thought, the landscape that hadn't changed since he began this journey was suddenly different, as something appeared ahead of him that he wasn't expecting to see. That shouldn't be there, he mused. But his painful eyes widened at the lights. They shone brighter than nighttime Reno, though it was still daytime. Mirage came to mind, but he tamped it down and staggered on. Hours earlier, Jack Isby's car had broken down on Highway 50 in the middle of Nevada. The engine light came on first. Then the radio stopped playing Hotel California. When the world whited out amidst blasts of steam from the engine, he pulled over and panicked. He'd never seen so much steam, and with it came a smell, something that smelled like jail. He wasn't going to make his court date on time. That meant jail. When the steam dissipated and he could see again, he got out and opened the hood of his 2013 Subaru. He knew nothing about cars and didn't know what he expected to see or find. But that's what people did. Perhaps he'd find a card that read, "You receive a second chance. Try again." Despite his lack of hope, he returned to the driver's seat and tried to start the car. Not even a click. There wasn't a signal on his phone, but he dialed 911 anyway. Nothing happened. Jacksby, or Jax for short, unfolded his paper map. How far back was that sign that pointed to the name of a town? Here. Since the road on the map dipped downward, then up again, he figured he was on the upside of a U. He thought it would be quicker to backtrack if he cut straight through the desert instead of keeping to the road. If he used his compass and held true, he should have no problem reaching the opposite side of the U. And besides, he had come prepared for an emergency like this. Or rather, Angelina had prepared him before he'd left her in Reno. He shouldn't have gone there to see her last night. Not with this court date looming. She told him not to come, but he became suspicious. She was trying to keep him away for reasons other than his well-being. There had been no reason for his lack of faith. He'd found her alone, watching television, and she made him glad he came. He didn't tell her he'd raged out of his mind with jealousy for the entire 6-hour drive and would have bodily injured whoever he'd found her with. He had been able to hide that part of himself from her so far. Or maybe not. Maybe he'd blamed her for sleeping late. He packed the 2 one-gallon water jugs and a box of protein bars into his backpack. He placed a wide-brimmed hat on his head and wore long sleeves to protect his face and arms from the sun. There was a blanket, too, and Jax shoved it in with the other things, then started out on foot with his sunglasses set firmly on his nose. After 2 hours, he wondered how one body could sweat so much, and his legs and feet already ached. He drank water freely, without bothering to conserve, figuring he was almost there. He had to be, when he faced the same landscape another 2 hours later. The second water gallon was more than halfway gone. He sang to keep his mind off his dilemma. Eventually, his thoughts envisioned his lawyer scowling in the air-conditioned courtroom as his client, Jaxby Johnson, never showed. The road rage offense had ended with a death and infuriated him whenever he thought about it. Mance Rayfield had started the altercation and had provoked him not once, but 4 times. 4 times, Mance had tried to run him off the road. On the 5th try, Jax outmaneuvered him, and Mance's big, bad Silverado tumbled down into a ravine. Jaxby's Dodge had followed, but he made it out with only a few scratches. Mance didn't make it out at all. He got what he deserved. As far as Jaxby was concerned, it was his lawyer who bade him to show remorse when he appeared before the judge today. Now hope lay ahead, and Jax used every last bit of his strength to get there, determined to reach the lights. He crawled his way through the last part of the journey and arrived on his knees on the road between 2 brightly lit saloons facing off from opposite sides. The road disappeared into the landscape in one direction and ended here. Despite his pain and suffering, Jax laughed at the ingenuity. One saloon glowed a white, brighter than the sun on the desert sand, and was aptly named the Pearly Gates. The other was lit with orange and blue flames. The Gates of Hell was posted on its entry. The Pearly Gates door opened, and someone came out. Jax glimpsed a room filled with people and wondered where all the cars were. Perhaps they were bussed in, and later a bus would arrive to take them back. "My name is Peter," said the man from the Pearly Gates. 2 people dressed as angels helped him up and brought him inside. "My name is Jaxby Johnson. Do you have a phone I could use? I need to call my lawyer." "We have no phones here," said Peter. "Everyone asks, though, what happens if there is an emergency?" "We have no emergencies either. Please excuse me while I get my book." Jax was given cold water and a small cake. "Angel food," said the angel that served it. Jax was feeling much better by the time Peter returned with a tome. "Read it," Peter told him. "At the end, you'll have a choice to make." Jax looked at the book, entitled Jaxby Seth Johnson, with his Earth date to the current date listed on the front. What was this? How did they know who he was? He looked for Peter, but Peter was nowhere. He opened the book. The first page brought up his first lie, the first candy bar he had stolen, the first fight he'd gotten into, and went on and on from there. He was served more cake as he read. A pitcher of water was refreshed, While the road rage incident with Mance appeared near the end, it wasn't his last offense. Angelina had tried to wake him that morning, and he'd pushed her away and told her to leave him alone. Then, later, even though she'd filled his car with emergency supplies, including the paper map and compass, he blamed her for running late and called her a foul name just before he left. It made her cry. She didn't deserve it. It was the only thing he felt remorseful about. Peter returned. Jax had 1,000 questions, but didn't get to ask them. It's only for that remorse you are feeling that I am offering 1 second chance. Heed my warning. You won't get another, so choose carefully. Follow me, he said. Jaxby followed. They stepped outside. A mountain of boulders stood before them. Peter offered a silver hammer to Jaxby, 1 stone for each of your trespasses, and 2 stones for each of Mance Rayfield's misdeeds since you took his life. Once you turn the stones to dust, you may stay here. Think carefully before you decide, for my offer comes but once. If you decide against it, we'll disappear forever, leaving you to the mercy of the gates of hell. Jax was confused. Was this a dream? A mirage? Something didn't feel right. He looked over the pile of boulders, reaching to the sky. Changing them to dust with the small hammer Peter offered would take a lifetime. Who was Peter, anyway? I don't feel I should have to pay for Mance's wrongdoings. Very well, answered Peter. He took the hammer from Jax, and the world flashed out. Jax was back on the road, back on his knees. The pearly gates was gone. The gates of hell lay before him. Jax crawled forward. No one came to help him. When he pushed the door open, a crowd cheered. 2 people dressed as demons pulled him to his feet. Mance Rayfield stepped out and punched him in the face. The crowd booed. Jax punched him back. The crowd cheered, back and forth, booing and cheering. Jax was tiring. He needed to rest. You win, he said to Mance. Boo, the crowd answered. Mance hit him again. The crowd cheered. I said I give up, Jax said. The crowd booed. On and on and on. All at once, a gate appeared in Jax's peripheral vision. He edged toward it, connecting a bloody fist to Mance's bloody nose. Another step, another blow. When he was close enough, he opened the gate and raced out into the desert. A sky of stars welcomed him into the cold night. Without warning, he was back in his Subaru, singing along to Hotel California, smiling in relief, until the engine light came on and the radio stopped. The world whited out amidst blasts of steam, and Jaxby pulled over. He opened the hood, tried to start the motor, packed his 2 jugs of water and his box of protein bars. He left the blanket behind. He wouldn't need it. This time, he stuck to the road and conserved the water. Maybe a car would stop, or a bus. Hours later, lights blazed from up ahead. When his feet gave out, he crawled. A buzzard cried out from the lonely sky. Only the gates of hell remained. The pearly gates was gone. For the first time in Jaxby's existence, he felt remorse. Remorse for everything. Watchers. The asylum's security surveillance room was a claustrophobic chamber adorned with peeling wallpaper, crumbling shelves stacked with aged records, a small wooden desk, and an uncomfortable metal chair that creaked under the most minute amount of weight. A single rotary dial telephone sat on the desk. A thick layer of dust covered every surface but the desk and chair. The dim overhead light bulb flickered sporadically, casting eerie shadows across the aging linoleum floor that peeled in the corners. The centerpiece of this dilapidated room was a massive wall lined with outdated, grayscale CCTV monitors. Each monitor displayed a different section of the asylum, a haunting panorama of deserted hallways, medical examination rooms furnished with rusting metal beds and equipment, large dining areas, office spaces, and various other rooms possibly used for forms of recreation. The monitors were ancient, relics of a bygone era. Their screens emitted a faint, sickly glow that seemed to exaggerate the shadows lurking in the corners of the room. The images displayed were grainy, distorted, and pixelated. A small hand-written label accompanied each screen, indicating the location of the video feed. The cameras themselves, once cutting-edge technology, were now obsolete and barely functional, occasionally losing connection for a few seconds at a time. The crackling audio of static from the occasional disconnected video feeds added to the eerie ambiance. It was as if the very essence of the asylum had seeped into the wires and circuits, imbuing an unsettling presence into the surveillance system. James was 2 hours into his new job and already regretted accepting the position. As a college dropout, struggling to make ends meet, the job posting for a part-time security surveillance officer with great pay was almost too good to be true. There were no certifications or education required to apply. The agency didn't even require any previous experience. The pay was nearly double the current minimum wage. The only downside to the posting had been the hours. From 9 o'clock at night until 5 in the morning, James was surprised to find he was the only one to accept the position following the interview. Unwilling to let such a good paying opportunity pass, he agreed to all terms he was presented during his interview and had no follow-up questions of his own when asked. As such, he was hired on the spot and given the time and address of his first shift. Looking back, James realized he should have asked at least a few questions, such as where he would be working and why no one else had accepted the position following the interview. Lunaria Sanitarium, built in 1920, was nestled deep within the forests of the Pacific Northwest. The nearest city, taking at least an hour and a half by car, was Portland, Oregon. The hospital consisted of 3 separate buildings. The central 4-story building contained the medical rooms, recreational suites, and other administrative offices. Each 2-story wing building housed bedrooms with minimal furniture, a dining hall complete with rows of tables and chairs, and basements with locked holding rooms. Only the hallway leading to the doors for the holding rooms contained a camera in each basement. Every room in the sanitarium still contained original furniture from the time it was abandoned, as if all inhabitants simply left for the day and never returned. Vacated in the late 50s, the entire property was left untouched for nearly 7 decades. Courtyards, fields, and small farming patches were overgrown, nearly reclaimed by the forest whose land it was built upon. Despite the impending vegetation, the buildings themselves were surprisingly in good condition, despite the rust, mold, and rotting surfaces. Upon relieving the daytime officer at 9 o'clock, a gangly old man who provided no explanation of his duties other than not to fall asleep, James settled in for a long night. The metal chair behind the desk protested against his weight, and he made a mental note to bring a cushion for his next shift. Figuring he would need help staying awake and being kept from boredom, James brought a backpack stocked with snacks, energy drinks, his handheld gaming console, and a few books his sister had lent him. He had debated whether or not he would get in trouble for playing games or reading while on duty. But how hard could watching screens of empty rooms be? Surely he would get in more trouble for falling asleep rather than being partially distracted. Gaze darting between monitors on the wall before him, a sense of unease settled deep within his gut. The screens were grainy and out of focus, an occasional ripple in the feed, giving the effect of movement and catching his attention. The wall of monitors was so wide that he had trouble viewing every screen without having to turn his head, causing the screens of the opposite side to disappear from his focus entirely. As the minutes ticked by with no changes, James relaxed and pulled his gaming console from his pack. He kept the volume low, just in case, and was careful to peek at the screens between each level of his game. The few games he owned that didn't require internet connection quickly lost his interest. He glanced at the time on his cell phone. 10:30. An hour and a half into his shift, and he was already bored. As James reached for his backpack, the scratchy sound of static caught his attention. One of the screens in the top row, which was labeled East Wing Dining Hall, showed nothing but black, gray, and white interference. Heart leaping into his throat, James watched as the lines danced across the screen. Less than a handful of seconds later, the feed resumed, and he was presented again with long rows of tables and chairs. Breathing a sigh of relief, James slumped back into his chair, the metal groaning in protest. Waiting for his heart rate to settle, James took in the creepy aspects of the dining hall, showing through the feed. Long, wooden tables made up a majority of the space. Looking to be made of one solid piece of wood, James could only imagine how heavy they must be. Chairs dotted the spaces between the tables, all pulled out and looked to have been haphazardly pushed around, a few even laying on their sides. In the far left corner of the room, a single door stood open, leading to the hallway beyond. James's attention fixated on the chairs. Had they been pushed out from the tables before? Racking his memory, he thought that they had been pushed in, not that he had paid any special attention to the small details. Clearing his thoughts with a shake of his head, he pulled one of his energy drinks out and popped the cap. Perhaps he just remembered wrong. While sipping the carbonated liquid energy, James pulled out a notebook and pen and began taking notes on the condition of each room, more for the peace of his own mind and to pass the time than any other reason. The shadow, the night, was silent, draped in an inky darkness that swallowed the world outside the small security room. I sat alone, surrounded by an array of flickering screens that illuminated my face in a ghastly blue glow. The hum of the surveillance equipment was the only sound in the room, its monotony broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling or the distant wail of a siren. I was the lone sentinel, tasked with safeguarding the premises during the bewitching hours of the night shift. Hours had passed since I settled into my chair, my eyes diligently scanning the labyrinthine halls and desolate rooms of the building. Everything appeared as it should, empty, lifeless, and eerily quiet. But as the clock ticked deeper into the night, a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. The air seemed charged with a palpable tension, as if something sinister lurked just beyond the reach of the camera lenses. I leaned forward, adjusting my seat and peering closer at one of the monitors. In the dim light, the corridor appeared to stretch endlessly, the flickering fluorescent lights casting long, ominous shadows on the walls. As my eyes darted across the screen, I saw a movement, a mere blur at the edge of the frame. My breath caught in my throat, and I focused on the camera, my heart pounding. There, in the grainy black and white footage, was a figure. It was tall and gaunt, its features obscured by shadows. The figure moved slowly, almost purposefully, down the hallway, its gait uneven and unsettling. I squinted, trying to make out any distinguishing features, but the face remained hidden, shrouded in darkness, a shiver crept up my spine as I grabbed the radio at my side. "Central, this is security. I've got a visual on an unidentified person in Corridor C. I need backup." Static crackled before a voice responded, thick with sleep. "Copy that. We're sending someone your way. Stay on the line." I nodded, my eyes never leaving the screen. The figure continued its eerie saunter, disappearing momentarily from one camera's view, only to reappear on another. It seemed to be toying with me, always staying just out of clear sight. A phantom in the night. Minutes dragged on like hours as I awaited the arrival of my colleagues. The figure persisted in its haunting stroll, growing closer to the main entrance with every passing moment. I gripped the edges of the desk, my knuckles turning white, and watched in dread as it reached the lobby. As if sensing my gaze, the figure turned its head toward the camera, and I gasped. Its eyes, 2 points of cold, blue light, glowed in the darkness, fixated on the lens, as if it could see me. I recoiled, my heart pounding so loudly that I could hear it in my ears. "Central, it's looking at the camera," I stammered into the radio. "I need someone here now." The response was a garbled mess of static and fragmented words. Desperation clawed at me as I watched the figure approach the security room. It moved with an unnatural grace, its movements silent and deliberate. My fingers fumbled for the door lock, and I managed to secure it just as the figure reached the hallway outside. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room, and I pressed myself against the wall, my breath shallow and rapid. I could hear its footsteps now, soft but deliberate, as it approached the door. Each step sent a chill down my spine, and I prayed that the lock would hold. The figure stopped just outside the door, and I held my breath, willing myself to be invisible. Through the frosted glass window, I saw its silhouette, tall and imposing. Its hand reached out, fingers curling around the doorknob. I bit down hard on my lip to stifle a scream. My entire body tensed, ready to bolt at a moment's notice. Seconds stretched into an eternity before the figure withdrew its hand, and I heard its footsteps fading away down the corridor. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The building seemed to groan and sigh around me, the very walls whispering secrets that I couldn't comprehend. Summoning my courage, I cautiously unlocked the door and peeked into the hallway. It was empty, devoid of any signs of the figure. I hesitated for a moment before venturing out, my flashlight casting shaky beams of light across the walls. The air was thick with a sense of dread, and I could feel unseen eyes watching my every move. I retraced the figure's steps, my footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. Each flickering light and distant sound sent my heart racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that the figure was still there, just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I finally reached the lobby, my eyes scanning the area for any signs of movement. The room was still, the silence broken only by the distant wail of sirens. I let out a shaky breath, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. Whatever had been in the building with me was gone, but its presence lingered, a haunting memory etched into the very walls. I made my way back to the security room, my steps quickening with each passing moment. As I entered, I glanced at the monitors, half expecting to see the figure staring back at me. But the screens were empty, showing only the empty halls and deserted rooms. I sank into my chair, my hands trembling as I reached for the radio. "Central, this is security. I think it's gone. I don't know what it was, but it's gone now." The response was a crackle of static. And then a voice came through, tinged with concern. "Are you all right? Do you need medical assistance?" I hesitated for a moment before shaking my head, even though I felt far from all right. "No, I'm fine. Just shaken up. I'll be okay." The sun began to rise, casting a faint light through the windows and dispelling the darkness that had settled over the building. My relief was palpable, but the memory of that night would forever haunt my dreams. I had come face to face with something beyond explanation, something that defied logic and reason. As the day shift arrived to relieve me, I gathered my belongings and made my way to the exit. The building, once familiar and comforting, now felt alien and menacing. I stepped out into the daylight, the warmth of the sun, a stark contrast to the cold grip of fear that still clung to me. I glanced back at the building one last time, my eyes drawn to the security room window. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of movement inside, a shadowy figure standing amidst the monitors. But it was gone in an instant, leaving me to wonder if it had ever been there at all. I walked away, my footsteps quickening with every step. The world around me seemed to blur, the events of the night replaying in my mind like a nightmare. I didn't know what I had encountered, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. Some things, it seemed, were better left in the darkness, where they belonged. Down under the Manhattan Bridge, overpass, running along the streets of Lower Manhattan, crossing over Center Street, I kept an even tempo. The sky suddenly darkened as heavy clouds covered the blue sky, like spilled ink clouding out over parchment paper. I could have turned back and avoided the storm, but I needed to get my miles in. Post the numbers. Do the work. Think of that Starbucks cappuccino and the warmed-up butter croissant that's waiting for you. I had already gone 5 miles by that point. but 6 miles was my daily minimum. And I was hurting. Right calf cramping, stitch in my side, labored breathing. Count your steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Tyson is the best. Tyson can't be beat. The training was the only place where the force of my will held sway. The only thing in my control. Ever since the accident, it was even more important to stick to the plan. Keep my health intact. For without that, there was no livelihood, no finding a partner, no future family, no legacy to mark the fact I was here and alive. Without that, I was nothing but an advertising account manager in an agency. The net purpose of my life being to create desire in people's minds and associate their pre-existent needs with a brand that had the answer to their woes. It is all snake oil, really. There is no such thing, no panacea. I learned that in the hospital. I kept asking, isn't there a drug or something to reverse that? Their heads shook. No? Isn't there anything that can help with that? Help the healing process? Their heads shook. Just rest and rehab and my will. Just work and luck. As I crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, I dodged an older Ukrainian woman with a shawl and a steel utility cart filled with groceries. A bunch of kids walking along with their heads down on their phones, smoking stogies and taking drags off vape pens, and dozens of sightseers taking selfies. None of them were turning back. None of them were chastened by the storm. And I wasn't going to abandon my planned training over some weather. I needed to get in my daily 6-mile allotment. I owed it. I couldn't come up short. Everything depended on consistency, inerrancy, and discipline. I remembered laying in the hospital bed after waking up from the induced coma. I remembered rehab for the foot drop in my left foot that wouldn't flex due to the paralysis of the nerves, the damned peroneal nerve that I'd never heard of until it became my nemesis. For a while after the stroke, I couldn't see from my right peripheral and experienced a kind of pause in my thoughts during conversations. Just lost my bearings and couldn't remember what was just said. In tests at the neurologist, I couldn't repeat a simple sentence, which made it hard to carry on a conversation. That is how it goes. One day, everything is normal, and then you get struck by lightning, or in my case, a Prius. Taking my bike out to buy groceries on a Tuesday night, I got sideswiped by a Prius and suffered head trauma that resulted in a stroke. The rain came forth in a downpour. The wind cracked like the lashes of a whip, and the cold exhalation of the river pulled the heat out of the autumn air. I felt the first warning droplets, sprinkles of mist, icy tendrils. Then they came harder, steadier, coating my forehead in a glaze of salty New York City rain, all acid and recycled Hudson River sludge. Truth be told, I alternated between the carrot and the stick. I'd count steps, give myself a little rah-rah stuff, and think of my after-run meal. But I'd be lying if I didn't own up to the fact that most of it was an evil drill sergeant saying, "Who are you kidding, you worthless loser? And your life is nothing. You are nothing. You're a fucking loser. Worthless. A piece of shit. Why do you even exist?" And worse, that is the voice, which has been more persistent since the stroke. And after the stroke, there were also occasional visions and hallucinations, usually malevolent ones, fears brought to life in the form of ghouls or ghosts, scarecrows or hobgoblins, just 80s B-movie stuff mostly. Nothing truly terrifying. A few moments later, the deluge crashed over my shoulders like shower water, running down my back, a furious gush of water. And the wind hit my face, buffeting me with unrelenting blows. And the wind slapped my back, muffling the street sounds and cocooning me in the isolating cone of rumbling storm sounds. It was isolating and unpleasant, the farthest thing possible from 70 degrees and sunny. When I finally came over to the Brooklyn side of the bridge and found some city ground shielded from the wind by buildings, with sufficient overhangs to shield me from the rain, the air was cold and crisp. Perfect autumn air, redolent of carpets of crunchy brown leaves crunching underfoot on the sidewalks. But I was already soaked to the bone. I made my way down into Dumbo, sailing along by buildings with Merlot-covered bricks on their faces, watching you as you go, and cobblestone streets that give back sound as you clomp along, as if they are conversing with you and warning of the things hidden in alleyways and liminal spaces amid the cityscape. I headed under the Manhattan Bridge overpass by Adams Street to where people were enjoying the cool weather at wooden picnic tables and congregating to enjoy the autumn evening. They were all dry and had arrived before the storm rolled in. Happy with themselves, no doubt, for their attention to the weather report on their iPhones. Applauded, I could not boast. I joined them and sat at a picnic table, drenched in cold rain. Steam coming off my face, my forehead, and my very breath. The rain was in my sweat-wicking t-shirt, in my Lululemon running sweatpants, and my water-resistant running shoes were squishing out water like a wrung sponge as I walked to the bench and sat down in a heap. A puddle of waterlogged defeat. An old Jamaican man directly across from me had a gray glass eye beneath drapes of dreadlocks. He was playing chess with a young black boy, school age, wearing a ball cap. There was a midget. He was a handsome fellow, square and black-haired with a side part, wearing a collared shirt and khakis, carrying himself with the deportment of a king. He was clean-faced, with a small mustache, giving just a hint of the rebel. I saw a red-haired woman in a green dress walking past. I saw a crow fly through the archway, down toward Pebble Beach. It was a surreal moment, separated out of time. And then, as I sat calmly, looking about, I heard a sound. It was a chirping whistle, a piping, a chattering screech. Chwee-a, pep-a, chwee, chwee. The sound came again, haunting, melodious, distressed. Chwee-a, pep-a, chwee, chwee, oop, chwee. Then on the heels of the sound was a mocking chortle. Orb, qua, orb, 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 qua. I looked about. I looked at the red-haired woman in the green dress who had sat down and was talking to a 7-foot-tall monster, a giant, who looked like an adult sitting at the tea table outside on the back lawn of a doll's house. They went on chit-chatting without a hint of disturbance. I looked at the Jamaican man with the dreadlocks and the glass eye. He moved his rook nonchalantly across the left-hand side of the board saw, capturing a threatening bishop with a satisfied smile. I could not see the little boy's reaction, but he was a gaunt boy, malnourished, with a Yankees ball cap. I looked at the midget, who was reading a book in the light of the golden hour, facing outward on the park bench he chose, oblivious to his surroundings. Did none of them hear it? Chwee-a, pepe, chwee, chwee. Then I looked up and identified the sound. The thing that made it. It was perched, inverted, clinging with claws like meat hooks that dug deeply into the concrete of the archway, holding the sinuous body in defiance of gravity. Its coat was a brilliant golden color that shimmered like fall leaves coated in nail polish and adorned with 1,000 tiny shimmering gemstones. It glistened with a slight pink hue. Its tail was a lion's tail, through and through, a happy, wagging tail that was at least 2 feet in length, with a big pom-pom on its end. It had a spiraling circular mane from neck to shoulder blade that transitioned from white feather to golden fur, capturing all the colors of the palette in between. And its wings. They hewed closely to the torso, the muscular lion's torso, draping the sides, a gold leaf texture, reminiscent of the hammered, thin, unmistakable coating on bar ceilings from a bygone age that features the iconography of the architect's fancy in repeating patterns and frames the rooms in an unnatural glow. And the head. The head was the most haunting. An eagle's head. That regal head. The beak with flaring nostril holes, alternating in the light between bright canary yellow and deep amber. A thing of menace. And the eyes, big and raven-like, but sad. A killer's stare, eyes that encompass the eddies of shame mixed in with the confident assurance of death itself. The black swirl of destiny that has come to pass. Chui-e-pepe, chui-chui. The thing sprinted along the archway to the ground like a circus motorcycle in a cage, seemingly immune to gravitational pull. Its footfalls light and quick. Impossibly light and quick. And it was off toward Pebble Beach. I sprang to my feet and ran after it, running at a high tempo, not knowing why I was giving chase. At first, I could see it ahead of me on Adams Street, heading north toward Water Street, and I picked up the pace. It ran along the sidewalk beneath some scaffolding, and then leaped upside down, running along the underside of the scaffolding like a weightless mirage. I sprinted hard, and lactic acid was pooling in my legs. We bore left on the cobblestones of Water Street, and the creature was back on the ground, pulling away from me, leaping with long, fast strides over the cobblestones. My legs grew heavy and leaden. Just past Jacques Torres Chocolate, it grew so small in the distance that it became like a lonely speck of gold. Finally, the creature reached Pebble Beach and the great glass cube over Jane's carousel, and leaped again over the velvet stanchion ropes at the entrance, and perched atop the carousel frame. I finally reached the attraction and ducked inside, leaning against the glass walls of the display to catch my breath. I watched as the creature circled around the top of the carousel. The carousel started up, and strains of old-fashioned music from the band organ floated over the river, mingling with the sound of crowds passing by. Da, dun, dun, da, dun, da, da, da. The 48 hand-carved wooden horses began to rise and fall as they circled Brooklyn Bridge Park. Chui-e-pep-e, chui-chui. The alien visage of this regal creature, with the head of a old eagle, vocalized its haunting call, and then regarded me, head motionless, at full height over its tucked-in and perched haunches, front legs straight, shoulders drawn back. It sat stationed on the far, ornamental exterior work beyond the moving mechanisms of the carousel, which spun beneath him. And it fixed its gaze and continued to regard me in eerie silence. Was this some apparition? A lengthy hallucination caused by my damaged neural veins? Or could this impossible vision be real? "You dare to chase after me?" it said, not in the voice of an ordinary man, but in a booming voice, like that of a great general. I thought it was a hallucination. I had to see if you were real, I said. This is no dream, boy. What stands before you has the strength of a lion and the wisdom of an eagle. I am the protector of great treasures. I test men's merits and search their hearts in hopes of finding, in any of you, the nobility and courage required, it said. Well, I guess I'd best be going back home. I was just finishing up a run. I wasn't looking for treasures or claiming nobility or anything like that, I said, beginning to walk toward the door. Stop. Don't take another step. Are you telling me there's nothing your heart desires? The creature asked. Desires? Too numerous to mention. But right now, I just want my health back. A sliver of confidence, maybe, I said. Humph. That isn't much. What would you use this health for? What would you do with your courage? Run in circles? Aim for a promotion? Settle down with a girl? Is there nothing more that drives you than a hamster wheel? Some money to throw at creature comforts? And settling down? No sense of adventure? It asked. Not for nothing, but making rent in Brooklyn and starting a family in this day and age is an adventure. Let me tell you, I said. Enough, insolent little man. You see these horses on this carousel? He asked. I see them, I said. Horses are the natural enemies of us griffins, the griffin said. Why? I asked. Because horses are mindless servants that serve the will of the pure and the wicked alike. Lemmings, good-natured creatures, almost aristocratic in their complete humility and subservience, but to no end. Us griffin are creatures of purpose, and you, my friend, are giving horse vibes, the griffin said. So, what is my purpose then? I asked. A better question would be, what is the purpose? But at least you are on the right track, the griffin said. Okay, so what is that? I asked. I must be on my way now, but I will see you again, the griffin said. And it turned, and in a flash, the griffin jumped over my head, landed outside of the display, by Pebble Beach, and with long, fluid strides, like a leopard, dove onto the river and began churning across the water. Legs turning so quickly, it looked like the spinning wheels of a locomotive. The powerful wings opened, and it took flight, flapping those giant, golden, shimmering wings as it soared out of sight. I continued my run back home, churning my legs, a fire in my abdomen, heaviness in my legs, a drowsy, delayed hitch in my left leg's footfalls. And as I reached Williamsburg and was almost home, I suddenly collapsed. A light was shining in my eyes as I came to. A red-haired woman in green medical scrubs was flashing a light to test my pupils. Doctor, pupils constricting normally and dilating with the removal of the light, she said, looking down next to her. Monitor the patient for the next half hour, order up an EKG, and let me know of any unusual speech patterns observed, the man said. The doctor was a midget. He had a commanding presence despite his small stature. As he walked out of the room, the nurse did a few more tests and then turned back to me and said, "Rest up. You'll need your strength." A few minutes later, a giant man with a huge forehead entered. He had to be 7 feet tall. He said, "I am here to put some heparin and warfarin into the IV drip. It'll just take a minute." The man placed the screw-on syringe into an input tube and pushed the drugs into my IV drip. Then he flashed a friendly smile and was off. Finally, a Jamaican man with dreadlocks and one gray glass eye walked into my room and started writing on the whiteboard on the wall in front of me. "Roger," he wrote on the board. "I'm Roge, like Rogie, and I'll be taking care of you these next few days. Just press down on that dar button if you be needin' anything, and I'll be right in to sort you out. Okay?" I nodded at the man as he left, and scanning the room, I saw a little black boy in the bed next to me. He was asleep, and his head was covered with a Yankees baseball cap. He lay there completely still, in a coma, or maybe sleeping, just as gaunt and frail as they come. I had taken my EKG tests, had been wheeled around for some scans, and then brought back to my room. Exhausted, I'd passed out for a bit. After coming to from a short nap, I heard it again. Chui e pep e chui chui. Looking before me in the room, I saw the griffin. It was seated in the corner by the open window, letting in the cool October air. "What's your why?" the griffin said. "What?" I asked. "You want to get better, right?" the griffin asked. "Of course," I said. "You're going to need something a lot heavier than a Starbucks cappuccino and a croissant to put up with what this life's gonna throw at you. You're gonna need a lot more treasure to make the adventure worthwhile," the griffin said. "I don't know what that is," I said. "There will be time, my boy, to find it," the griffin said. "But are you even real?" I asked. "I am real, if you believe," the griffin said. "But what is a purpose to live for? Give me an example," I asked. "That is up to you," the griffin said. And with that, jumped through the window, calling back, "It's all up to you." And as he took flight, I felt a searing pain in my left shoulder. Chui e pep e chui chui. Sails pitch. Molly pushed open the door of the conference room. It was a loud, heavy, metal one that left her fingers smelling of dust. She brushed them on her colorful leggings. The conference room wasn't well lit, but it was in a cheap motel on the side of the highway, so Molly hadn't expected much. It smelled of stale coffee and sugary pastries that were piled like faux gold on the table pressed against one wall. Sadie turned and smiled at her. The women embraced each other. "Thanks for coming out, beautiful," exclaimed Sadie. Molly nodded back, her eyebrows slightly raised at the memory of her husband, asking why she was bothering to come at all. She had explained that Sadie did help them move in, and she was always inviting her to things. But Molly always declined, and it was just preposterous. And the kids had sleepovers, so they were occupied, and he had stopped listening. "I was happy to," said Molly. She released Sadie from her hug, but found that she held on. Awkwardly, Molly attempted to rewrap her arms around Sadie's long, thin body. That girl just never seemed to gain any weight. Sadie chuckled a bit and gestured at the pastries and coffee. "Coffee at 9 p.m., Sadie?" teased Molly. "I thought people liked coffee," protested Sadie. "We do. It's just a bit late, don't you think?" said Molly as she approached the table. "Sadie, don't you think?" She repeated her question. "Sadie?" Molly spun around, but found her friend had walked off to the computer. She shrugged and snagged herself a cup, but the burnt smell put her off a bit. She grabbed a cherry Danish and a napkin before taking a seat on one of the black plastic chairs. "Oh," exclaimed Sadie. "Oh, sweetie, could you please sit in that chair?" She indicated the chair on the end of the row at the right-hand side, instead of in the middle where she could clearly see the presentation. "Sorry, babe. It's just, more gals are comin', so..." She let her O drag out uncomfortably and pursed her lips, and then smiled at Molly, who was scrambling with her pastry and purse. "Who else is coming?" asked Molly. Sadie spun on her heel. "What? Who else is coming?" repeated Molly as she settled into her new chair. "Oh, some gals from the book club, I hope, and some friends of mine." Her words trailed off. Molly began throwing her hair into a bun, an old habit she had when she got nervous. She tried to be polite and asked, "Do I know any of these friends?" "No, doll, but you'll love 'em, I promise," said Sadie as she marched over to Molly. "God, I do love that dress with those leggings. Just so cute. Perfect for fall," she added, pointing with a polished red nail at the brightly covered leaves that dotted her friend's legs. Sadie grabbed a napkin. She dusted off the chair Molly was just in. Molly, for her part, opened up her mouth to protest that she wasn't dirty when another guest burst through the door. It was quite clear to Molly that Sadie knew this girl better than her because they squealed at the exact same decibel. Molly overheard Sadie mention something about work. At that word, Molly frowned. She remembered work. She remembered lunch with friends, gossip in the break room, and feeling like she was actually contributing to something. Of course, that was all before motherhood. Molly rolled her eyes to keep from crying and raised her pastry to her lips. A few tantalizing flakes fell off, but when she went to bite down, she found the treat rock hard. Disgusted, she removed it from her eyeline and wrapped it up in the napkin. She sniffed her coffee warily, but found a similar level of grossness at the sight of shiny oil circles catching in the light flickering above her head. Molly sighed, longing for her warm bed and beloved husband's soft protests at random news articles that flashed by on the silent TV. She noted Sadie's new friend was permitted to sit in the middle and that the woman didn't take a single snack or cup of tar. But hey, It wasn't like she was missing out. She was rail thin, just like Sadie. Perhaps she was part of the same spin class. A calendar, without extracurricular, for the kids certainly has more time. Molly sighed. A few more women entered. They came in pairs, like on Noah's Ark. 2 women in all black dresses. 2 women in bright leggings that sent a bolt of envy up Molly's spine. 2 women in fur coats who didn't greet Sadie, but joined the first woman with bright red hair in the middle. Sadie kept looking at the door and checking her watch. At exactly 9:15, Sadie flicked the lights off and wobbled to the front in her high heels. The presentation had started. "Welcome, beautiful souls," flashed up on the screen. The words were decorated with pretty pink sparkles and brightly lit up the room. "Thank you for joining me so late tonight, my darlings. But as you know, I didn't want a single excuse about work running late." She clapped her hands together, and it echoed around the room. The side chatter stopped. "I want to talk to you about an exciting opportunity that has just changed my life for the better," began Sadie. She looked like a creepy ghost behind the bright light of the presentation. Molly suddenly felt very cold. "Before I get into the nitty-gritty details, I want to share all of the perks that this lifestyle has given me," said Sadie. She flashed the next screen, where bullet points began to zoom into focus as she read them out. "It has given me eternal youth, a low-calorie diet, which is totally customizable, incredible investment opportunities, and lifelong friendships." Suddenly, the door burst open. In walked 2 women, clearly late to the party. But Molly was relieved because their hair was in messy ponytails. They looked around the room and mumbled apologies. She thought she noticed a fruit pouch from the same brand she purchased sticking out of one woman's person. Sadie directed them to the chairs next to Molly, with a sour look on her face. Molly eagerly made room for the women. Sadie cleared her throat. "Now that all of our guests have managed to arrive," she paused for dramatic effect, her gaze barreling down at Molly's row. "We can continue the presentation." Molly's eyebrows furrowed with concern as she heard the words of her husband echoing back at her that this whole night was a bad idea because she didn't even know these women. But she missed the community of her old city. They had picnics in the park with the kids, a carpool schedule, neighborhood block parties. Of course, that was before it all fell apart. How can you get these opportunities and more, you may ask? Sadie's bright voice brought Molly back to the present, but got real screechy at the end of that question. Molly felt a cold shiver run down her back. "It starts with me. My name is Sadie Malone." Sadie clicked the next slide, and a beautiful professional photo of Sadie in a power suit beneath a weeping willow appeared. "And I have been involved with this group for, well," Sadie let out a giggle, Centuries. She flashed a winning smile and clicked to the next slide, which showed an edge of an acrylic painting of her flashed on screen. She was dressed in a medieval gown. The artist had captured the beauty of the very same tree from the previous slide, only smaller. Sadie seemed the same exact age. Her skin was less smooth, but the artist still captured it, creamy color against the backdrop of the rushing river. Molly listened for the sound of bird chirping, insects as they flew past her ear. It was as if she'd traveled back in time. The piece felt familiar, and she placed it as one she had seen during a visit to the art museum. A sense of dread began to fill her. Yep, that's me. Can you believe it? She asked. Sadie seemed to grow taller as she leaned into the audience. It's like I haven't aged a day, and neither will you if you choose to join our 3-step program. Her voice seemed to echo in Molly's ears. She felt herself growing tired and colder with each passing second. She readjusted her position in the chair and pinched herself to stay awake. The next slide showed a photo of Sadie embracing a woman in a side hug. "This is BB," said Sadie. "She looks kinda sad, doesn't she?" Sadie's clicker turned into a single red laser dot, which darted over the woman's frumpy dress, unappealing limp hair, and sad teeth. Well, after 1 month with me, she went from this, Sadie clicked to the next slide, to this. Before them was a bright photo of a drop-dead gorgeous model who Molly swore she recognized from a red carpet or two. She wore a long, red ball gown. Her hair was curled into beautiful waves, and her smile was now white as bone. Now, I will warn you, ladies, that if you don't follow every step of this program, deadly consequences await you. Sadie's voice seemed to drop an octave, and the image of BB faded. Molly felt Sadie's icy blue eyes lasering into her. It felt like everyone left the room except the two of them. She felt safe and warm in her friend's gaze. The cold of the conference room had melted away, giving into the promise of eternal youth. I can't sleep, can't give in, mumbled Molly under her breath. If I sleep, I'll die, she continued, and gripped the cheap plastic chair with all her might. But I know you gorgeous, gorgeous gals aren't dumb enough to not listen to me, right? Exclaimed Sadie. The spell was broken. BB was back to being bright, as was Sadie's tone. Now for the nitty-gritty, darlings. And I want you to know, I'm only sharing this opportunity with you because I just feel so close to all of you, she said, as she clutched her hands into a fist around her heart. There were soft murmurings of agreement. The first step to this whole thing is to let me bite you. Sadie's voice had a tinge of glee at the very end. No, seriously, ladies, I'm not joking. I summoned you because I just think y'all will make the very best vampires in the whole gosh dang world. Because when I bite you, you pledge your undying loyalty and servitude to me, your BFF. And after that, you can host vampire parties of your very own. So you, too, can create your own vampire communities. Isn't that great? Then she used that icy gaze again. The world faded around Molly, and she was left in the embrace of her friend's warm spell as she said, "Just remember, you'll always be a part of mine, and loyalty to me always comes first. Best friends for life." Molly sat stunned in her chair. Her heartbeat pounded like in the movies. Sweat formed on her neck and dripped down her body. She felt like a child who had put too many blankets on the bed too early in the fall. It was just so hot. And Sadie had the solution. Sadie could cool her down. Sadie could fix her. She blinked her heavy eyelids a few times. Her face was fully relaxed. Subconsciously, her hand drifted to her neck. She felt it drift up her face, pull back, and slap her cheek as hard as it could. It was a technique her father had taught her as part of her driving lessons. Suddenly, as the room came back into view, something inside her screamed at her to run. Grab her purse and run. But it was like her legs couldn't or wouldn't move. Instead, she found herself staring at the presentation before her. Like zombies, the women beside her began to stand and join the line in front of Sadie. It was a horrible, perverse version of communion. Desperately, Molly looked around for the exit, but the darkness around her made it quite the challenge. She reached down for her purse, coffee, and pastry. Slowly, she stood up, suddenly thankful Sadie had forced her into the aisle seat. Molly was careful not to turn her back and was slightly transfixed at the sight of Sadie pulling the women in closer around herself. She seemed to be whispering soft words as she stroked one woman's long, red hair. Molly inched past the final row of chairs, careful to have it between her and the group of hypnotized victims. She used one hand to feel behind her, looking for the edge of the pastry table, but she backed in too quickly, and the table hit the wall. All eyes turned to Molly. "Ah!" screamed Molly. She decided at that moment to turn her back and look for the door. She sensed that the mob had turned and began to stumble over the chairs, reaching for her, grabbing at her. Their arms and hands were like vines. Molly searched her memory desperately as she replayed the night. She had moved chairs. She had been at the center. She had gotten a pastry and coffee. But which one had been closer to the door? Sadie's voice rang high above the moans of her servants. "Molly, Molly, come back, Molly. Please, won't you be the best vampire babe in the world? The coffee had been closest to the door, so Molly turned herself around again and was face to face with the girl with red hair. Her eyes were glazed over. Her mouth hung open, and she was blocking Molly's path. As the other women began to draw closer to them, Molly scrambled with what to do. She felt a bit of coffee slosh over her hand, so she threw that in the girl's face. When she remained unfazed, Molly threw her pastry at the woman. This seemed to stun her, so she grabbed more pastries. Each one hit like the rocks they were, and slowly the stranger stumbled back. Molly bolted to the coffee, but was greeted by the pair of women in black dresses. They smiled at her, holding their hands out like friends. Their fangs glistened despite the lack of light. Molly smiled sweetly back, just so she could open the top of the silver carafe and push the coffee over. The women wailed in agony as burning hot coffee poured out. Molly found her door and pushed with all her might into an empty hotel hallway. She ran past the bewildered guests and the bored concierge. She considered telling them to call the cops, but knew from experience no one would believe her anyway. The burst of cold night air filled Molly with adrenaline. She pushed the alarm button on her car and ran to it. In the safety of her vehicle, she locked all the doors. She let out a guttural sob. "I just want friends," she wailed into the night. After a few moments, instinct kicked in and threw the car in reverse to get her home. James was asleep when Molly returned. She was shocked to find it was after midnight. She triple checked all the lights were on, and the doors were locked. So were the windows. As she approached the bed, she reached beneath her husband's pillow and wrapped cold fingers on the wooden stake. Then, her excuses. Ted body wrapped itself in the warmth of her husband and attempted to fall asleep to the rhythmic sound of his beating heart. Morning came and went. The work week came and went. By the following Saturday, the nightmares of the last week felt like a scary dream. Of course, that's when the letter came. It didn't come by postman or dropped off at work. It was nailed to Molly's front door one night when she got home from work. The letter's envelope wasn't like the normal white one you find at the office. The paper was rough and slightly yellowed, like when her son, Jake, had a school project, so they soaked paper in coffee to make it look old. And when Molly flipped it to the front, it bore a pretty, pink, sparkly seal with the letter S on it. Her husband told her, wait for him to open it. So after the kids went to bed, they sat up in theirs and slowly broke the seal. Inside was a sheet of paper which had Sadie's beautiful calligraphy that matched Molly's original invite to the conference. The message was short and sweet. I really think you should reconsider, babe, for your family's sake. Call me. S. Molly crumpled up the letter. You gotta admit, it's a new tactic. They usually just invite us over for a BBQ and a few cheap beers, James said with a laugh. Then, realizing his wife wasn't laughing with him, he added, Guess it's time to move again. Molly remained quiet. A few tears gathered in her eyes. James once again tried to lighten the mood. You think one of them would figure out I'm a descendant of the Van Helsings before inviting you over? Maybe that's why they keep trying. Like some sick cat and mouse game, she replied, her voice trembling. Then, with a frown on her face, she added, I just wish I could find some real friends. He offered her a warm embrace, much more comforting than last night, as he whispered into her hair, Someday you will, I promise. James was wise enough to let her pull away. She marched into James's home office. He couldn't see her eyes, and turned on the shredder. It roared to life, grinding the letter into tiny pieces of confetti, cabin fever. Then the storm broke and was replaced the next morning with a frozen 1880s blue sky. The kind when after the clouds clear, the world shuts down with a blinding but heartless sun, no wind, and dead quiet. Jason and Bill huddled around the cabin's only wood burner. Above them, the pine timbers groaned and complained with the weight of the storm's snow, over 20 feet on the roof. But what dropped their stomach into a mine shaft was the sharp crack about every 10 minutes, a sound like a double barrel going off in the rafters. The cold clenched down on the roof beams. The cabin held in a merciless, ice-cold fist. It was not unknown for a collapsed cabin to be found in the spring, the dead still frozen under the rubble, a beast with a blood-froze beard. Bill mumbled out loud to himself, feeding logs to the wood burner. He'd almost lost Jason the night before. The storm outside had been ghost white and howling a blow. He had worried Jason would lose the rope he'd strung to the outhouse, 60 feet from the cabin. He knew from experience, men lose their way, only to be found in the spring thaw. So when Jason had slammed the pine door and come back in, shaking and terrified, saying he barely made it back, and talking about his lungs seared out from the cold, he had sighed in relief. But when he'd calmed down later, Jason said, There's something out there, Bill. I could feel it looking at me. I swear I saw eyes in the dark, red eyes, and a growl. Provisions were low, so for supper, the only meal that day, Bill dished out steaming black beans, only a sourdough biscuit on the side. Bill, chicken. Bill, they called him, liked to talk when he was serving food, and fancied himself a philosopher, a cowboy philosopher. although his ranching days were well over. He was 50, which is old in the mountains, but a lot about Bill was still adventurous with his red kerchief, leather chaps he wore like skin, and his Stetson, which he rarely took off. As he dished out the food, he declared, "The Shoshone have 100 words for snow, Jason. Snow that grows out of the ground. A hoary frost sparkling with tiny ice fingers reaching for the sun. Snow that forms a crust when the top melts some and then freezes back up, which might break your leg in a post hole. And snow that lives in the worst cold and wraps itself in the body of a wolf and steals your soul. Like now. Bill, it's 60 below, and I don't feel much like talking about the cold." "I understand, son," Bill said, and took Jason's empty tin plate away. Later that night, Bill sat by the burner. The flame reflected on his weathered face, high cheekbones, and full lips. A handsome man, his wife had said. He stroked the scar from the edge of his eye to the back of his chin. A scuffle with Texas rough Civil War vets in '72, calling him half-breed in the street. But I know this cold is different, he thought. It's tougher with Jason. The fire held his eyes on the yellow-blue flame for a long while, the wood humming and spitting, the smoke smelling of pine sap. "Did you swear you wouldn't take on caring about another?" he asked himself. "Did you?" "Yes. After the sickness, I did. And now you're caring about this Jason. And that's why you're scared? You're getting odd." Bill kept feeding the fire, but couldn't help thinking about death. For him, a white wolf in his dreams, with a blooded snout, a red-eyed beast scratching to get in. The next morning, the Olson party beat on the door. Finding the cabin must have taken some luck. Dick Olson, his wife Martha, their daughter Susan, and their young boy, Joey. They filled the cabin once inside. Mr. Olson was near done. Living with his feet black from the frostbite, he could still hobble, but Bill had him put one foot in cold water. It began bleeding, and he wrapped it up. Jason asked Bill about the feet in the kitchen, and Bill talked low, so the party wouldn't hear. You can tell from his sagging eyes the West has whipped him, Jason. If you notice, his eyeballs are skittering like a mare beat too much. Once broke like that, too broke, a horse won't come back to anything worth working. Mr. Olson has the no blinks, and I've seen it in the mines. You best stay clear when you run up on a man like that. Next thing you know, you'll be staring too far away yourself. Their daughter, Susan, did not have the no blinks, Jason thought. Just with a sneak peek, he could see she was the most beautiful creature he'd ever put eyes on. Once she unwrapped from the weather, her long hair alone shone like some kind of goddess, he guessed. The blonde let loose, soft and shimmering. She made him think of a gazelle he saw once up in the high country. It stood with its white belly and golden hide, then ran off as light as air. The god's creature moved like grace itself, but Susan, just sitting there, was better. No, sir. You cannot chance more than a sneak peek when you run into a sight like that. He kept his eyes on the burner and was glad when the Olsen party carved out a private area off to the side, blankets making a wall of sorts. Bill made some supper for all 6, including himself. The last of the salt ham, hardtack, and black beans. Everyone silent around the pine table. Bill didn't talk much around strangers at first. Some said likely due to him being a half-Bannock Indian. But once the diners settled in, the boy Joey couldn't get enough and threw questions at Bill like a scattergun. How long you been up here? Why do they call you Chicken Bill? And where'd you get that scar on your cheek? Bill gave short answers, but his eyes smiled talking to the boy. He explained the Galena cabin was the way station for the Stanley to Ketchum route, an overnight midpoint on the 60-mile run. Jason was a postal officer and would ski the 60 miles on 8-foot board skis, the trail too narrow for a wagon and too steep for a horse. Jason listened in, but also knew Bill had lost both his wife and son to cholera and sparked up around children. The boy asked, "Why don't you wear a gun?" Bill said, "I'm done with guns, young man. Guns mostly don't ever work out like you expect." Joey's eyes grew into silver dollars. "Did you ever kill anybody?" The table went quiet, and Bill said, "Excuse me. Jason and I have to clean up. Come on, Jason." As he rose, his eyes were glistening, and Jason remembered Bill didn't like to talk about guns and killing. Bill and Jason were in the kitchen when Mr. Olsen came limping in. He was dodging around like he had something to say, but couldn't. Finally, he said, "Joe's mother feels... Well, don't talk to our son, she says." Bill said, "Sure, no problem." He took a deep breath and let it out. "You'll always be an outsider, looked at as an outcast by your own people, a savage Indian by the other." Jason felt bad for Bill, but the truth was he thought there was nothing he could do about it anyway. The next day, the Dawson brothers pounded on the door. After coming in, they spread out like it was natural to position themselves for a gunfight. The one in the middle was Cliff, the oldest brother. He scanned the room, his eyes not missing a thing, running over Jason and Bill like bacon, greasy fingers, assessing if they were a threat. He then stopped on Mrs. Olsen. "You get lost out of Pocatello? Standing me up in Ketchum seem right to you?" Slumped down at the table like a man giving up, Mr. Olsen stared at his foot wrapped in the bloody rag. He glanced at his wife, but she saddled up to Cliff. put her face close to his, and with a sweet voice Jason hadn't heard before, brushed her lips up against his right ear. "I'd come back for you, Cliff. You know that." Cliff shoved her off rough and put his head back and laughed. A mean sound, more coyote bark than laugh. He said, "I guess I know when I been had, you viper." He nodded to Mr. Olson at the table. "Sorry, Dick. You can have her back now." Mrs. Olson shot a look at her husband. He was slumped at the table, his hands shaking while covering his face, his elbows on the yellow pine planks. The smaller brother came out from behind the blankets. He threw a black carpet bag down on the floor. Cliff kneeled and opened it up. The bag was full of money, bundles of cash. Mr. Olson looked up. His eyes misted, yellow-red. "Our future Martha. You wanted Oregon. There it lies. You didn't count on the snow." And looking at his feet, "Much less this damn freeze." Grabbing the bloody rag off his dead foot, he threw it at his wife, which she knocked away just before it hit her face. Mrs. Olson hesitated, then lunged toward her husband, her eyes harsh, her face tight. With a harsh whisper, she spit each word like venom. "Yes, the storm and the damn freeze, you fool. You're an old fool, the worst kind. You know that? You only see what you want." Mr. Olson glared back at her, but she stared him down. Cliff packed up the bag and threw it to the third brother near the window, then turned to Mrs. Olson. He pointed his gloved finger at her and narrowed his eyes, laughing through his sneer. "It's true. He don't see you, Martha, but I do." And then he cocked his face at Mr. Olson like he remembered something. "But being Indian agent at Pocatello has its advantages for you and Martha, don't it, Dick? I guess the tribes will miss it none, not knowing it was theirs to begin with." Mr. Olson reared up at the table, wincing when he stood on his bare black foot. His face twisted up like being covered with fire. He stumbled out a derringer from his inside vest pocket and aimed it at Cliff. But Cliff was fast, quick with his gun. In the tight cabin, the shot rang out like the screaming wrath of God. Mr. Olson, thrown near off both feet, his back smacking hard against the pine wall, with his chest a bloody hole, he slid to the floor, and his boy Joey ran to the body, and Susan held her brother. The son, daughter, and dead man lying together. The Dawson men soon grouped everyone to the side of the cabin, while one brother held a gun. They searched for weapons and collected both the derringer and a shotgun found in the kitchen. The smaller brother filled a sack with the remaining food. Mrs. Olson grabbed Cliff's arm, holding him from turning away, and said, "Please forgive me, baby." Cliff threw her off and laughed, shoving her toward the table. Leaning into the table, Mrs. Olson stayed dead still as she stared at the wall. Cliff, behind her, spoke firm, like he wanted the pain to sink in. "You ain't worth much, hardly worth feeding Martha, but I'll be taking you, the boy, and especially Susan, up north to the renegades. They'll make use of you in the camps, but your daughter and boy Martha, they'll bring prime dollar." Mrs. Olson's hands gripped white on the table. The other two brothers drew their guns after hearing Cliff. In a short time, Jason and Bill stood at the cabin door, while mounted up in front of them in the bright sun and the dry pine air were the three brothers, but also Mrs. Olson, the boy Joey, and Susan on the last remaining horses, all tied to saddle horns. The Dawson brothers turned and broke trail, the snow pushing up above the horses' bellies, the hooves rising high to punch through the clean white, the pine hanging heavy with fresh snow. They were soon out of sight. Without a word, Bill pushed through the deep snow to the shed. He dragged the door open, hitting it with his shoulder, finally making his way in. After the sound of rummaging, he came out. Strapped on his side was a Colt .45 rig, low on his hip, outlaw style. He said, "I got the weapon, but not the means. We need a horse, Jason." The shed door was still open, and Jason stuck his head in. "You're right, we don't have a horse. I've got an idea, though, for something else." Jason and Bill took 2 pairs of board skis and pushed through the snow 100 yards to the top of Galena Ridge. The near cliff fell off the side of the mountain. If they could ski it, and Jason couldn't guess how, but if they could, they'd cut off the Dawsons 2 miles away, where they came out the bottom of the switchbacks. They had to take the chance. Jason strapped both himself and Bill into the skis where they needed to drop off. Bill stared off the edge, wide-eyed. He grabbed Jason's arm, nervous as all get out. Jason had never seen him panicked like that, gaping over the edge like a little boy. He choked it out. "I need to tell you. I could had your postman job, Jason, but it required me to ski. Turned it down, and hell. That's why they started calling me Chicken Bill." Jason laughed to look at him. "Hell yourself, Bill. No chicken about it. It ain't nothing," he lied. "Let's go." They pushed off. The skis fell through air, and Jason sidestepped to turn as he hit the bank. The snow flowed like a heaven's mist over their heads. Jason's skis swooping back and forth, a fine curve on the fresh snow, the cold flakes stinging his face. They weren't skiing, but flying. Bill just closed his eyes and took a straight shot. Together, they leveled out on the basin. The riders slowly came out of the trees. The horses were struggling to lift their hooves in the deep snow, tired and pushed too hard. The younger brother was the first to notice Bill standing 50 yards ahead. Jason could tell Cliff then saw Bill also, and was moving in position, turning side saddle so he could draw. As Cliff angled, Bill crouched in the snow. And when the two brothers pulled their sidearms, Bill drew in response, his gun light in his hand, like he was flicking his finger. He knocked the two younger brothers off their horses like nothing, ducks in a chute. Bill then took aim at Cliff with both hands, holding the revolver for the distance, but stopped. Mrs. Olson's horse crossed the path. The more Bill moved to get an aim, the more Mrs. Olson got in the way. Shoot, damn it! Just shoot! Bill blew air, exasperated. He raised his gun straight up and fired into the sky. This was the break Cliff was looking for. He leaned out, drew on Bill, and took him down with a blast of 3 shots. Cliff could shoot. Bill fell in front of Jason in the cold. As death approached, Bill didn't feel scared, but settled. A peace came over him. But you're leaving Jason, he thought. You need to tell him before you go. Leaning close, Jason said, "What, Bill? What is it?" He knew Bill was dying. You can do it, Jason. You're a far better man than you think, son. Bill then closed his eyes. A warmth moved over Jason that he couldn't explain. He suddenly realized Bill was the closest thing to a father he'd ever had, and it was right then. Jason knew he was done with can't do anything about it anyway, and it was right then he was done with the holding back, and he had to try. Feeling the heavy weight of the cold steel Colt in his hand, he stood up slowly and held the weapon down by his side. Cliff flanked him, staying side-saddled, with a broad grin on his face in the bright cold, moving to get the sun behind him. "Give it a try, boy," he said, and holstered his weapon. "When you're ready." And he angled his horse as he moved, his hand hovering on the gun handle. Jason lifted his arm, and Cliff's gun exploded in his hand. Jason never saw him draw. He was so fast. The slug hit him in the shoulder and threw Jason's aim. He fell to the ground, and Cliff was soon above him, dismounted, and kicking the Colt away. Jason looked down Cliff's gun barrel and felt his chest pounding. He knew the bullet was coming, and his only thought was hoping it didn't hurt. A quick ending. A snarling cut the cold air before Jason saw a white-shaped animal leap for Cliff, who fought the snapping jaws while he writhed on the snow, holding the white, wolf-like thing off his face. Cliff then screamed in terror. The animal slashed at him and dug in, ripping his throat out, then stuck its snout into the wound. Jason turned away, thinking he was next, but soon caught sight of the wolf flashing in the trees. An albino, pure white. He lost sight of the animal in the green pine, the needles covered in ice, crystals on the trees. 28 sleighs. Later, above the laughter and Christmas music, the bang against the door came. Thump, thump, thumped. Paul Reyes sighed. He patted his wife's hand and pushed his chair away from the table. "Don't worry, love. I've got this one." Rosemary frowned at him. "But everybody's here. Who could it be?" He stopped. Rose had framed the doorbell with tinsel. You couldn't miss it. It would take a brain-dead person to knock instead of ringing. He shrugged. "Carolers, or something. I'll give 'em a quid and tell 'em to bugger off." A round of laughter rippled around the table. The playlist swapped over to Wham's Last Christmas. Outside in the front hall, the door shuddered again. Thump, thump, thump. It banged hard enough to make the door viot in its frame. Annoyance flickered in his mind. The nerve of some of these charity-begging types. He wasn't one to sniff at donations, but give a man ample time to get up. And don't knock his door down like you're the wolf versus the 3 little pigs. He hurried along in his slippers. I'm coming! Hold your horses!" But still, the banging continued. Thump, thump, thump. The little panes of glass at the top of the door vibrated and threatened to shatter. The figure of a man swayed beyond, blurry and dark. Paul gritted his teeth. He'd have some stern words for whoever it was. It didn't matter what good cause they were raising money for. This behavior was downright rude. He slid the chain off and yanked the door open. "Oh, for goodness sake, what's your prob?" The man behind the door barged through, snarling and screeching. He wore a parka coat with its fur-ringed hood raised. It framed his mess of a face. He had blood smeared all across his skin, and his nose was missing. A window shattered somewhere in the back of the house, and a woman shrieked. Paul's stomach dropped, and he screamed. He grappled with the invader and grabbed a hold of his shoulders. "What?" he grunted. "Let go of me." The man clawed at Paul's shirt. He leaned forward and snapped his teeth. His breath was rotten, and he had bits of ragged meat caught between his teeth. He snarled like a wildcat, and his eyes were white, except for tiny pinpricks of blackness in the center. He flinched backwards from the bites. It was almost as if the maniac wanted to bite his nose off, too, as revenge for losing his own. Whatever was wrong with him, drugs, he guessed. He was dangerous, and Paul had to stop him. Paul grabbed the nearest thing from the shelf on the wall, an animatronic snowman. He smacked the madman across the face with it. Jingle Bell Rock played from the crappy speakers, and the snowman started to boogie. Paul hit the man with it again and again. "Get out! Get out!" The man recoiled from each blow of the rubber decoration. He snarled and shrieked, backing away through the front door as Paul struck him. At some point, something mechanical cracked inside the snowman. The song came out slurred and slow. Jack Frost danced slower. One arm snapped off, and his head dented inwards. Blood smeared across his white body. Adrenaline surged through Paul's veins, reminding him of how it felt to be a young man. He became aware of his battle cry as he fought the mauled lunatic out of his home. With the noseless man wobbling on the threshold, Paul landed a kick into the guy's gut. "And stay out!" he roared. The man went sprawling backwards over the Reyes' front steps. He clattered into a heap at the foot of their driveway. At the top of the driveway staggered a group of people. 2 men and 4 women. Each had various ghastly wounds, like the noseless assailant. A cheek torn open here, an eye gouged out there. Intestines spilt out of one woman's belly and trailed behind her like a bridal train. Across his small patch of lawn in front of the lounge windows, a woman with one arm shambled towards him. Paul's nerves turned to liquid, and his legs to jelly. He whimpered and felt his bladder threaten to release. He scrambled for the door, missed, found the handle, and slammed it shut. With shaking hands, he slid the chain back across, his fingers slaked with gore. "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus," he whispered to himself. Immediately, the door began to bang again, and so did the windows looking into the lounge. And the screams from the back of the house continued, high-pitched and terrified. Goose flesh rippled up all over Paul's body. These nutcases had surrounded the house. He had no idea what they wanted, but he guessed it wasn't a cup of cocoa. He pushed off from the vibrating door and strode towards the sound of the commotion. He brandished his decoration/weapon. Rose, in the kitchen, some of the attackers had smashed their way through the windows. The glass sliced their forearms to ribbons, but they didn't care. They were trying to pull Rose out by her hair. She shrieked and kicked and batted at the hands to no avail. Several of their guests stood by and watched, their faces drawn in a rictus of shock. They still held their alcoholic beverages. Sean from next door had gone white, and his beer was tipping and spilling on the kitchen tiles. Paul froze. Rose had always argued about getting double glazing, but he'd deferred. He now wished he'd listened to his wife. How long until the front windows, looking out onto the lawn, shattered under the strain? He slapped himself across the face and raced into the fray, swinging Frosty for all his worth. He smacked at the hands that snaked through the glass over and over and over again. "Get off my wife, you damn hooligans." That broke the paralysis spell over the others. The kitchen became a flurry of activity as people dropped drinks and grabbed a hold of Rose. Gail Clark yanked on Rose's feet, pulling her back into the house. In his vest and tie combo, Sean lobbed his pint glass through the window with a violent yell. The claws clutching Rose weakened enough for her to break away. Rosemary collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She held her hands to the blotchy red patches of yanked-out hair. Paul's mind was a flurrying snowstorm of thought. He stood in the kitchen, chest heaving. He stared out at the people gathered in his back garden. "Zombies," he said, not quite believing himself. "They're goddamn zombies." The swaying figures closed in on the house. Bangs and clangs echoed from the front. The dim winter light faded as the bodies blocked out the windows. They moaned in a chorus of the dead, their bloodied hands slapping against the four walls. Someone asked, "What do we do, Paul?" I don't," a woman screeched. "They're coming down the fireplace." An ice shard speared through Paul's core, and the world seemed to slow. "Sweet baby Jesus," he mumbled. An enormous thud shook the foundations of the house. The survivors staggered to the walls for support. Paul shook his head clear. He tightened his grip on Frosty and ran for the lounge. He skidded to a halt as a cloud of coal dust settled across the room, coating the furniture and the tree. The hell? The smog cleared to reveal a massive man in a red and white suit. He kneeled, fists on either side, like the Terminator from that Schwarzenegger flick. A large brown sack slung over his shoulder. He had heavy-duty black boots, and a Santa hat clung to his head. Paul's insides shriveled. He'd fought off the one at the door because they'd been roughly the same size. But this one? No chance. He tried to speak, but found that all the spit had evaporated from his mouth. Only a tiny mouse-like squeak came from his vocal cords. The giant looked up. His eyes sparkled above two rosy cheeks. The orbs looked normal. No cataractic whiteness, narrowing to a black pinprick. A big, thick, white, bushy beard sprouted from his face. Paul dropped the damaged Frosty, which bounced to the laminate wooden floor. His head spun like he'd taken a right hook to the dome. "Santa?" Paul whimpered. Santa smiled, but the smile was fleeting. "Yes, Paul, it is me. Do not be afraid." He glanced at the window, which showed the growing horde pressing against it. "But you should be afraid of those naughty boys and girls." Paul's heart hammered high up in his chest, like a hummingbird trapped in his torso. His brain kept rifling through facts and thoughts as if to make sense of it all. His old thinker kept coming up short. It threw its cards in the air and searched through the rubble again. "What?" He licked his lips. "What do we do?" Santa grinned and stood up. He was 8 feet tall and towered over Paul and the others. If he were any taller, he wouldn't be able to stand upright in this house. He chuckled a deep, throaty laugh. "Ho, ho, ho." It rumbled through the earth like a bear's growl. Santa unslung his sack and upended it onto the living room floor. Machetes, blades, baseball bats, cricket bats, axes and chainsaws, swords and knives, flamethrowers and guns, even a grenade, and armor. It looked like police riot gear, except it had the symbol of a snowflake. "I have brought you well-behaved children, some toys to play with." Paul regained some of his lost nerve at the sight of the armory. With this elf-like giant on their side, they could turn the tides of battle. He bent down and picked up a chainsaw. "Groovy," Santa bowed. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a few 100,000 more homes to equip for the coming siege." Out beyond the front window, a reindeer with a red nose was fighting off zombies with its antlers. It was winning. Paul felt like someone had punched the wind out of him. His eyes darted from Santa to the fireplace. "You mean you won't stay? Won't stay and fight? We won't last without you. I am afraid there are others who need me." Santa raised one gloved finger. "Remember, Paul, jealousy and greed are very naughty." He gestured to the treasure hoard on the ground. "I brought you these because you have all been good. Let us keep it that way. Will you at least tell us why this is happening?" Santa narrowed his eyes. "When there is no more room in ho-ho hell, the dead will walk the earth." And with that, he vanished back up the chimney in the blink of an eye. In the background, the glass front window started to crack. A lightning bolt fault line zigzagged. Paul revved the chainsaw and beckoned his friends and family. "Let's do this. Everyone, arm yourselves. Rose, stay behind me. Put some armor on." Gail picked up a spear and donned a helmet. She pulled up alongside Paul and jabbed at the air between them and the fracturing window. A flurry of movement in the distance showed that Rudolph was still fending off the zombies. Gail screeched. "Jesus is the only zombie we allow this time of year." Paul took the lead and strode forward, chainsaw in front like a jouster. Sean drew alongside with a shotgun. He pumped it, and 2 red shells bounced to the Reyes' rug. Sean had a steely look in his eyes that Paul had never seen before. He didn't even know the man could handle a gun. "The only thing we should be eating is turkey." The window gave way, and the zombies flooded in. Paul raised the growling chainsaw and went to battle. Rest in peace on earth.